What's going on, people? How is everybody doing? We are live, and just as I literally hit the live button, the skies opened, the heavens opened in the UK, and it has begun to rain incredibly heavy outside. Am I complaining? Not one bit. The weather has been incredibly hot, and so it's nice to have a couple of days where it's feeling like a traditional English summer, which is rain. That's what we're used to in the English summer. So yeah, it's quite cool. It means I can be functional again and productive during the day, something that I've missed somewhat. What's up, people? How's it going? Shout out to Crawforda, who was in the chat ready to go for a little while. Shout out to Tawana. I hope everybody is very well. And we've got, hopefully, hi Joy, how you doing as well? We've got an interesting one. At least I think it should be a relatively interesting one today. Um, where we are obviously we're back on the King Mono show now, so we're going to be covering the Jason Arday topic again. But one of the things I wanted to tackle is basically I want to say idea, but the problem was that stop talking. Thank you. Okay, I wanted to tackle the basically the kind of pervading idea that I've come to realize, and that's that people outside of the UK don't really understand what's going on with the Dr. Jason Arday situation. The unfortunate passing of Dr. Jason Arday, how he was hounded, how his scholarship was attacked, how none of it was founded, how he's being vindicated, but it's being ignored posthumously. So he obviously during his life, the plagiarism claims were completely thrown out and disproven on multiple occasions. That was ignored. Now many of the claims that were said to be kind of like lies or exaggerations, they're also being found to be true. So essentially the information that we're being regarded with at the moment seems to suggest that it was a big witch hunt, which is what we always knew, particularly on this channel. But I think a lot of black people knew in the UK it was a big witch hunt, and he should never have been set upon like this. But what you'll find is even within spaces that are now becoming sympathetic to Dr. Jason Arday's case and are condemning of the media and are very aware that the way the media reacted to this was very much over the top, you're still hearing kind of disclaimers being made and quid pro quos being thrown out, and it's kind of like, oh well, he was even though he was a bit of a charlatan, they're always kind of like qualifying this rhetoric where it was partially but not fully justified. And it's like, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. It was not justified at all. We're not going to revise history. We're not going to try and make ourselves feel good. And this is what you'll find the West does. And I'm using the term the West as opposed to white people or Zionists or whatever it is. I'm using the West specifically here because I'm crossing over into these kind of fields of academia, military, media, etc. All of these different industries that overlap, which form this huge monolith that we call the West. And this is what the West does. The West is a self-referencing, self-perpetuating machine where it creates the narrative, it creates the information, it creates its own justifications, and then repeats itself over and over again until through the process of mental fatigue, people just accept what they are presenting, even if what they are presenting is not the truth. And they do this over and over again. They did it with they're doing it with right now with we don't know the whole Odyssey scandal, the Odyssey controversy and the race swapping. That's only happening because we've been fatigued by the amount of films the West have created where they've made ancient Greeks lily white. And so now everyone just got it in their head. What used to look stupid and ridiculous, like people watch Gladiator now and they think it's normal for this blonde-haired white man to call himself the North African. And it's like, what the hell's wrong with you? They think it's normal to depict Caracalla with red hair in the middle of Libya. You know, the Libyan emperor depicted with red hair. Like this is what they think is normal. You know, whereas it was ridiculous a few decades ago when Brad Pitt came out as Achilles and he was blonde, and everyone was like, why the frig is Brad Pitt blonde and Achilles? That doesn't make any bloody sense. Now it's kind of like, oh, why isn't he blonde? You know, and this is what they do. They're self-perpetuating set of lies, and they do it with films. They do it with wars. So, you know, they decide they're going to invade a country. First of all, it's a country no one's heard of, and then before you know it, a few fatiguing media exposés down the line, and all of a sudden, oh, Maduro was a monster. He had to go. You know, it went from in literally the space of 1 week. It went from why the hell has President Trump kidnapped the president of Venezuela? This is sick. This is disgusting. Is this what we're doing now? We're just kidnapping people to, well, you know, Maduro was a monster and he did have to go, but I would have done it in another way. It's like, this is what they do. They fatigue you with their press. They fatigue you with their lies. They fatigue you with the perpetuating of their nonsense and evade you, kind of evade your perception of who the demons are. And they're doing that in the Jason Arday case, where they just hit you with so much information overload, you know, over and over and over again, that people think, oh, well, you know, maybe it'll be safe to take the middle ground. And it's like, there is no middle ground. Do you understand? Like, there's no middle ground. There's the truth, which is over here, and then a sea of lies. So that even if you're in the middle, you're still within the midst of the sea of lies. Do you understand? So this is how it works. But anyway, that's all an aside. I'm going to, or we're together going to watch a couple of videos done by this creator called Bad Empanada. I think I've reviewed some of his stuff in this channel before. By and large, I do like him. I like his outlook. But I thought he was a good case study of people that sit outside of the UK. So people who aren't in the UK and what their outside perception of this would be. And I thought he'd be a good case study simply for the fact that he's a bit of a free thinker. So he's not one of these people who, you know, aligns himself politically to the left or the right. He's one of these kind of pro-Palestine, anti-Zionist, you know who I'm talking about there. Call out the military industrial complex. One of these guys who, you know, by and large, we can see some alignment with. One of his big issues, and one of the things I've got a problem with him about, however, is that he one of the problems I got with him is that he doesn't really, although he doesn't really understand racism. So although he acknowledges that racism exists, he doesn't understand racism. Okay, and it causes him to have this kind of like a little bit of a glitch in his matrix, so to speak. But the thing is, he's had a couple of takes, and I thought I wanted to review them because he raises some points that are kind of standard, flagship talking points of people who sit outside of the people who sit outside of the mainstream political spectrum. So that's a good way to describe him. He doesn't sit within the mainstream. I can watch his content a lot of the time. He has recently had a falling out with FD Signifier, which I haven't enjoyed. It's actually, I think he's clout chasing a bit there, but what do I know? I'm irrelevant in the scheme of these larger channels. It's nothing to do with me. But the point being that I think he has a perception here. I think it's valid, but I think it's good for us to address these perceptions because unfortunately, as is always the case, we find ourselves in a position where we don't have any friends. And I've said this from the start, we as Black people don't have any friends. And unfortunately, it takes situations like this for it to really dawn on us as a community that we really do stand alone. We stand in isolation. And even people who perhaps have the best intentions still get it wrong. still don't understand. And I'm not going to make this entirely a race thing, actually, because I've already stated this, and I'm going to double down on the fact that I haven't seen many Black American creators get this Dr. Jason Arday thing correct. And I haven't seen many Black British people get it correct. In fact, the only people who I've seen get it correct are Black people from Britain, of which there's a handful. Okay. And then outside of that, everyone seems to be getting it wrong. So let me stop speaking now and let me let the guy speak for himself. I'm going to put it on a 1.5 or 1.25 playback speed, so we get back a bit of speed. Like I said, this first video we're going to watch is a bit older. It's 9 days old, and I think it's a valid watch. And then the other one we're going to watch after this is a bit more quality playback. Here we go, playback speed. The one we're going to watch after is a bit more recent, and I felt the need to combat it. So this one I agree with more, but then the one we're going to play next, I have quite a few parts that I disagree with in terms of his takes. And that's because, once again, it's that I'm not going to say it's the fatiguing effect actually on him. I think it's a case of he just doesn't understand how race and academics and all of these things, all of these different variables meet at a very a very negative cross section in the UK. Let's put it that way. They kind of like meet at this very negative cross section where you don't understand why people are using certain language and are doing certain things, because you don't understand how hostile the UK is to racially inflammatory language. You don't understand that. So let's get into this. Because I think that will highlight the things, because we've got a bit to cover. Let's get into it, and then we'll kind of take it from there. Hit a 1 in the chat if you feel like it's playing back okay and you can hear the audio well, and we'll go from there. 2 if there's any problems with the audio, obviously. Okay, getting 2s back for the audio. Let me see what's going on. Okay, cool. No problem. I will sort out the audio now. No worries. My bad. And let's remove that and start again. Thank you for letting me know, guys, so we didn't have to go too far into that. Let's try again. What on earth is going on? Let's put that screen there, and we want audio, please. Let's try again. No, okay, you're being a bit cheeky there. I think that's the view we want. There we go. All right, we're giving it another try, and we're bringing it back.
I want to talk about something that happened this past week in the United Kingdom of Smackbum Pewets. So this past week, this academic, Jason Arday, killed himself. He was a University of Cambridge professor, and he killed himself following this months-long media beat-up campaign against him. Like, the right-wing media chose him as like their punching bag. And, when you look at him, you can pretty easily guess what the reason why they published hundreds upon hundreds of articles about him might have been. In the 9 days before his death, 188 articles about him had been published in the British media. That is pretty fucking insane.
The number continues to climb, by the way. So 188 when this was done about, I think, a week and a half ago. I think it's doubled now. And the sad thing is, although a portion of those articles are reporting it from the perspective of, being contrite and repentant for their participation in perhaps allegedly the reason why he's no longer with us, there are still a number of publications that have just simply doubled down. They've given very halfway non-genuine apologies, and then continue to do exactly what they started out to do, and are still digging and still being the vile outlets that they are. So interesting that.
Now, I've looked into this case a bit, and he was definitely a bit of a con man. I say a bit of a con man, not 100% of a con man. He lied about a lot of stuff.
So that's the point that I wanted to raise there very quickly. Once again, it's that kind of like, I'm going to be middle ground here. And I'm not going to say he was an absolute fraud, because that's what the far right and some of these mainstream outlets are saying. I'm going to say he was a bit of a con man. So you're attempting to find the middle ground, especially if you know how the mainstream media works. You probably think, oh, well, you know, middle is safe, but it's not always safe. It's not always safe. Okay. In this case, it's not safe because no one, one of the things they've done very effectively is they made sure he himself, his voice has not been heard. Many of the things that have been said about him, he's refuted. People who he's known have refuted it, and they just simply don't report it. They'll continue just to report the falsities in the knowledge that people aren't going to, in the knowledge that people are going to listen to them and not listen to him, because he needs the media. People don't have outlets of their own. They need their own media. And just like Tim has said in the chat right now, you know, speaking with no proof. And that's exactly how it is. It's kind of like, oh, he was a fraud, he was this, that, and the other. And it's kind of like, they can't qualify that. A lot of the things that are attributed to things that being things that he'd said are apparently not things that he said, or things that have been attributed to him kind of like with unknown authors and this, that, and the other, or people finding these hidden drafts of this, that, and the other. I mean, there's all these kind of accusations that have gone out, but very little kind of concrete. He said this on this day and it's not true. That is what they are completely lacking. Well, there you go.
Stuff, a lot of inconsequential stuff, mostly like about his early life, where he came from, that sort of thing. But he was also accused of plagiarism.
There's no complication or kind of like query or controversy around his early life or where he came from. There has been some controversy, obviously raised by clout chasing idiots, about how non-verbal he was, with one person from what I can see claiming that he wasn't non-verbal. But then we have, you know, names of institutions, places where we could get teachers, where we could get first-hand testimonies, and we haven't had schoolfuls of people coming forward saying he was verbal. We only got like one individual. So that tells me that that individual, unless you get some substantiating support, is likely lying. But that's neither here nor there. Let's carry on.
Which is the thing that matters a lot more. And I looked at the plagiarism accusations because he got a PhD in 2015, and then he was hired as a Cambridge professor. And I looked at the plagiarism accusations, and it really wasn't that bad. It was nowhere near as bad as they claimed it was. The claims against him in regards to his PhD thesis was that he plagiarized 188 total sentences, as in he either paraphrased them or copy-pasted them verbatim from another work. I went and looked at the actual PhD thesis and the comparisons, and what I saw was that he actually cited the person who he supposedly plagiarized something like 15 to 20 times. And what he actually did is just, he failed to cite her in a lot of other instances. But these instances, for one, they are not like it's not like he's ripping her off. It's not like he just stole her PhD thesis. He just completely failed in certain instances in his PhD thesis to accurately cite her. But this was, 188 sentences out of a PhD thesis, which is much longer than that. And this is not really like sufficient academic misconduct to even have the PhD thesis retracted.
And he's spot on here. So this is one. I can see people coming back talking about this bad empanada dude and saying what a bad apple he is. And like I said, my kind of like view on him is not necessarily, someone has said that he's anti-black, and I'm not gonna argue with that. I probably need to see more of his stuff. But my view on him is that he's just very racially ignorant. He just comes across as these kind of like typical kind of like, non-black people who think they're liberal, but ultimately are not for us, and ultimately do not empathize with our position and don't try to understand our position in society. So you saying he's anti-black, I'm not against that. I just can't endorse it because I haven't seen enough of his content for me to say this dude is anti-black. But I will watch that video that you've recommended because it sounds like it's rather condemning. But the point I was going to make is regarding the plagiarism claim, and this is the thing, everyone just trusted Nathan Cofnas and his claims that, it's plagiarized, and he used plagiarism software which is never used by institutions for these kinds of things because it will pick up false positives often. But in addition to that, it has been confirmed that all of the alleged plagiarism was essentially restricted to the literature review. And that's something that a lot of people aren't touching on. So it's important to note that in a literature review, and I know because I've done academic papers, and I'm sure other people in this chat has, in literature review, the whole idea is that you're summarizing the work that's already been done within the field. And often literature review is kind of like the driest part of the paper. It's the part that you kind of just want to get through. It's the part where you say, currently in the field, experts say X, Y, and Z. And then you have to figure out a way of rewording stuff that people have already said, because you're just presenting what's been said. So it's not the place where you present your original ideas. It's not the place where you present your research. It's just simply saying, this is what people currently talk about. So I had a laugh actually when I had my interview with Dr. Enriquez, where we talked about kind of the literature review, and I laughed about the fact that a lot of Black academics have a very similar literature review. I had one in my paper, she had one in her paper, another one paper, and we have to do this entire chapter where we explain to people what racism is, who the originators of racism are, and then we all use kind of like the same reference points. We all use Blumenbach, as our originator. Well, he wasn't a racist himself, but kind of like where the first idea of kind of racism and phrenology and anthropology first came in with the skull measurements, and then it was progressed by such and such, and we all have really similar kind of like aspects or parts to our literature review. Now, as you can imagine, when a lot of people are having to repeat the same talking points, you're going to get these areas where it's going to feel or sound like plagiarism. We're going to use the same references. I use Dr. Nell Irving Painter and blah, blah. And you'll hear these same people being referenced across various people's works when they have these areas. And then they have to spin this narrative into their own words, and a lot of it is going to sound like repetition. And that's exactly what happened in Dr. Arday's work, where it's kind of like, oh, his work sounds exactly like this person's work. It's kind of like, yeah, and I could give you 20 other academics who have a very similar literature review in their opening chapters, because they're having to explain these things. And the reason, and one of the reasons why is because people are so much in denial about racism in the UK, that chapter explaining that racism actually exists and is real is actually quite boring and tiresome. Do you understand what I mean? Yeah, thank you. Deborah knows what I'm talking about. She's talking about Lenny. Yes, we've all written that same chapter. Yeah, we've all written that same chapter, but we all have to write it because unfortunately, academia doesn't get the picture. The Brit, like, why do I have to do a chapter explaining what racism is? Can I not just dive into my paper? That's because of the way that academia is structured, and this is one of the points that I think Baden Panada misses here. And all of the, and he gets, in fairness to him, he's given Dr. Arday credit. Well, not credit, but he's given Dr. Arday the benefit of an honest representation of his scholarship here, and saying, no, it's not plagiarism. It's just a little bit of faulty referencing and faulty citations. So I appreciate the fact that he's done that here. But I just wanted to kind of like clarify this entire plagiarism argument that's been raised by Nathan Cofnas is a load of nonsense. And in fact, the only reason perhaps he himself hasn't, and I'm talking about Nathan Cofnas here, hasn't been pulled up for plagiarism is because his ideas are so flipping audacious that it's likely they're going to be entirely original. So his literature review, because he's trying to argue about, friggin' race realism, his literature review is not going to be something that's been written over and over again. It's going to sound really groundbreaking and original when he's pulling together these ideas to make his quack theories sound like they're plausible. But anyway, just wanted to point that out regarding Dr. Nathan Arday's alleged plagiarism. It's not plagiarism, and that's been, totally refuted on multiple occasions now by the Liverpool John Moores University, by Cambridge University's initial kind of review, by a panel of scholars, okay, And yeah, and even the accusations that were brought against his academic papers were both essentially thrown out. He just had to make some minor revisions that showed better citations. So no plagiarism. Not like the plethora of people who actually plagiarize, who we've talked about on this channel. One being Dr. William O'Reilly, who's still at Cambridge University and openly plagiarized and was done and dusted case. You plagiarized, had his papers pulled from academic journals, his papers that he was profiting from. But that's an aside. Let's carry on.
This would not be bad enough. Basically, like, he could go and revise it and properly cite her, edit it a little bit, and resubmit it, and everything would be fine. This is the sort of thing that should have been caught by his advisor and definitely should have been caught by the review board, but ultimately it's not severe enough that you can say he plagiarized his thesis. But he was certainly a bit of a charlatan. Like, you listen to him talking, it's typical modern day academic identity politics slop, basically. But the thing is,
I see that's where he's wrong, and this is where we're going to dive in a little bit more about his work, but not right now. But calling Dr. Arday's work identity politics slop comes from a place of privilege, and this is the thing that Baden Penada doesn't understand. Just like I was explaining there, a lot of these words, a lot of these things that he thinks are buzz phrases and jargon, it's actually terminology that is used to covertly put forward a cogent argument about racism because of how resistant academia is, particularly in the UK, of Black people raising any kind of criticism against their overarching, establishment, which is racist, deeply racist. It's very, very difficult as a Black person to pierce that and to remain in employment. And I know that because I know many Black PhDs, and they will tell me this exact same thing. So it's not slop. You just don't understand the obstacles that we face. Okay.
There's plenty of academics who are like this. Like, half of the fucking social sciences are like this nowadays. If the crime here was that you have an academic who basically deals purely in the abstract and focuses way too much on identity politics bullshit, then you have to fire like half of them. And there's entire fucking academic fields that...
By the way, no Black person focuses on identity politics too much. It's a privilege that you can even call it identity politics, because actually to every Black person, the number one obstacle we face is racism. It's not this thing that we choose to talk about. It's not this optional extra. It's not this kind of like, oh, well, I'm going to be really identity political. Today we don't do that. Okay, it's literally the biggest obstacle. This massive centralized systematic form of oppression that we feel from every sector of society, from the media, from the police, from academic institutions, from workplaces. Literally, what was covert become more overt in terms of racism. Yeah, that's what we face on a daily basis. Yeah, you saying it's identity politics nonsense, he talks too much about it, is like turning around to, you'll get this analogy, it's like turning to a Palestinian and saying, well, you talk too much about bombs every single time. Oh, every day you're talking about bombs dropping, every day you're talking about your children being unalived. Oh my God, when will you stop talking about bombs dropping and your children being unalived? Oh, the dangerous Jews, oh my goodness me. That's what you're saying sounds like to a Black person. When you say we talk too much about identity politics, do you think we do it for fun? Do you think we acknowledge and seek to combat racism because it's a fun thing to do? It's not. It's not fun. Yeah, it's not fun. We'd rather not talk about it, but it exists, and we're not going to be second-class citizens to make your people like you happy or to make people like the British establishment happy. We're not going to do that. We are going to keep talking about it, and we are going to keep fighting against it until we see it resolved, to be clear.
Are like unfalsifiable abstract bullshit, basically, where it's just a bunch of morons wanking each other off, like political science, for example. So if that's the crime, then there's plenty of other people who are guilty of it. The reason why he specifically was targeted is because he was sort of for one, he was definitely made a target.
And by the way, when he talks about people kind of having these circle jerks, that's what we call them in the UK, having these kind of like circle jerk situations where they're, like you said, wanking each other off or whatever, that is academia. That's not any particular form of academia. That's all academia. Yeah, from the hard sciences, from astrophysics to mathematics to flipping Egyptology. Oh my God, one of the biggest circle jerks there is. Okay, you have people who are quoted by modern Egyptologists who weren't even academics in their time. Yeah, they weren't even academics in their time. They've gone out and they've done their quackery all the way across, all the way across Egypt. These people who were unqualified, Petrie being one of the biggest ones. Yeah, Budge is another one. These people who are just kind of like out there, charlatans, but they're quoted ad nauseum. Okay, people use their works, people reference their research. Okay, so if you want to talk about circle jerks in academia, we have to be a bit more honest about the way that we are discussing that, because that's all there is in academia. These kind of like circles, these silos of recycled information that go round and round. Now, the thing about what Dr. Arday was doing is he was contributing to a repository that doesn't exist. We as Black people in the UK, in academia, we don't have a repository. So that's one of the reasons why you'll probably find, like I was explaining earlier, the same people being referenced over and over again. It's because we don't have a repository. I talked about this on my channel the other day. We don't have a repository of reference information when it comes to archaeology when you're African and you're looking at ancient Egypt, for instance. Okay, we can't trust the way they've interpreted data. We can look at the primary information that they've pulled, and we have to look at the artifacts and start from scratch. But in terms of a proper interpretation, a proper native African interpretation of those artifacts, we have got no repository of secondary research to fall back on, because it's all been bastardized, it's all been written by colonialists, and it's all been written by people who have been pushing forward this false Hamitic hypothesis or dynastic race theory agenda. We can't use that. It's garbage. Okay, so we have to create our own. And when people trying to attack this kind of like base building of Black-centered scholarship, it's very problematic for us as a community, and we have to kind of like draw arms and make sure that our Dr. Ardays aren't all systematically taken out in the same way. We have to make sure that's the case. So this is not something that I'd expect Badin Panada to understand. And once again, personally, I'm saying to you right now, I'm not coming at him. This is very much just kind of like symptomatic of people who don't sit within our community. They have a complete lack of empathy for what, and why people are doing certain things.
By Cambridge, for example, and a lot of the media attention that he got, it was very much like Hassan Piker like he was sought out and highlighted by the media. They made him into a much bigger thing than he needed to be, and that set him up as a figure to be torn down, like a target for racists, basically. And Cambridge certainly treated him like a token, and he certainly played into that narrative of him being this guy who overcame adversity, racial adversity as well, to get to where he is today, when really he was just like a sort of bog standard average scholar.
And to be clear, I'm not going to comment on where Dr. Arday ranks in terms of scholars. I don't believe that. I'm not going to even draw myself into such an argument. These people are all PhDs. As such, they're all more highly qualified than I am as an academic. So first of all, I don't have the right to rank them. And it's funny how we've got this kind of like this entire body of internet personalities and commenters, and suddenly everyone's a PhD. It's like, oh, I didn't know that everybody was a PhD. So all of a sudden, everybody has got a right to opine on whether or not Dr. Arday's masters and PhDs were up to scratch and the quality of his scholarship. I was like, oh, I didn't know that this world produced so many PhDs. This is absolutely sensational. How many people have friggin' PhDs in the UK? It's amazing. All of these journalists seem to be PhDs. Everybody's got an opinion about his PhD. But that being an aside, I think the comment about the quality of his scholarship and the fact that he got that position through tokenism, once again, you don't understand the UK. So it's kind of like this opinion that's being met through skepticism and cynicism. You've come to this opinion that he got his job through being a token. He was never a token. If you look at his appointment, I explain this to people, he was never a token. He got that job because Cambridge University were going in a certain direction, and they wanted someone who had the requisite skills in diversity, the requisite skills in, and not just racial diversity, neurodiversity as well, and the requisite skills in that kind of field of psychology. They wanted all of that together. Okay, they needed those skills to be balanced, and there wasn't a huge amount of people. In fact, the argument is that they likely created the position for him, and that's not DEI, by the way. That happens a lot of the time when you have exceptional candidates that you want to tempt into a position. You'll create a role for them to say, look, we need this kind of personality to progress our institution from being here to being here. I know this because I called into a show and explained the other day. I've had a similar situation. Nothing to do with DEI once again, but I was at a school, and that school created a head of faculty position specifically to stop me from leaving. They wanted me to stay, and so rather than make me a head of department or just bump my pay, they made me a head of faculty. And I became the youngest head of faculty in London at that time. I'm not going to go into those details. I've done it on another call, do it another day. But the point being, they created that position for me to keep me in the role. Nothing to do with DEI. It was to do with, once again, I was quite exceptional in that role. And therefore, it was an easy decision for them to say, hey, let's make him head of faculty, keep him here. It allows us to develop a new department with it under his wing as well, etc., etc., etc. Those kinds of things happen. I'm not saying that in any way, shape, or form to glaze myself, but to see that I perceive Dr. Arday's appointment differently than people who don't perceive it that way. They'll say, oh, DEI, oh my God. It's like, no one else could do that job. If they didn't hire Jason Arday, they didn't have anyone with those requisite neurodiversity and racial kind of like skills crossing over, where they said this guy is going to be able to progress us from A to B as an institution. That's not a DEI hire. They didn't lower any standards. He already was a professor of another university. So he moved from one professorship to the other. Okay, it wasn't a promotion. He moved from one professorship to another. Yes, it was a more recognized institution, but he was still moving from professorship to professorship. So people need to understand there's a difference there. He wasn't a token. That is a false narrative that they've created once again to undermine him. And that's what this entire DEI attack is built on, the fact that he didn't deserve the role. And actually, he certainly deserved the role. Okay, he was absolutely the right person for that role. And this is one of the things that they don't. And here's the irony. Nathan Cofnas, who got his position at Ghent University, has been fired now. So I'm sure you guys heard that. So he got fired from Ghent University, or at least he's about to be fired. I can't remember, it's one or the other. But they have put through a petition. Many of the professors said this guy should never have got the position. And if you look at Nathan Cofnas's backstory, all his positions have been, he is the ultimate DEI hire. Like, he's literally gone from one DEI job to another. That's literally what he's done. DEI here, he got his first position at Cambridge through a scholarship he was offered through the Leverhulme Institution, who likely hired him because he had Zionist talking points in this who-ish owned institution. And so they gave him this scholarship, which guaranteed him work. And then after that, he gets fired from that position because he's a racist POS. He gets his position at Ghent, where he's heading up a department based on liberalism and ideology or something like that, which is something which is literally the exact opposite of where his specialism lies. And so now everyone's like, you didn't deserve those positions. You didn't deserve the one at Cambridge. You didn't deserve the one at Ghent. No one's called him DEI once. There's no word when white men are given jobs they don't deserve. We call that Wednesday in the UK, yeah? When a white man is given a job he doesn't deserve, it's called Wednesday, yeah? Because, it's just all the time, innit? It's just every day, there we go. It's Thursday at 6:30 a.m. Yep, it's white man gets a job he doesn't deserve time. No one calls it DEI. No one's got a label for it. Anyway, sorry, ran over. Let's go.
In the sort of field where most other scholars are just kind of like him. There's nothing particularly exceptional about him. And that's just the way that things are in a lot of academia these days. But the question is, why him? Why was he targeted this way? Why was there like 200-ish articles targeting him in 9 days? Why was there such a media furor about it? It's obviously because he's black. It's obviously because like he was put into this position by this institution, Cambridge, because they wanted to look progressive, because they wanted to have like this high profile black scholar talking about race issues and such.
Appreciate the fact that he has identified there it was racism, but I also want to note that both things can be true here, and I wish he could see that both things can be true. An institution can say, yes, we want this person in this position because they have a media profile. That's a part of your CV, by the way. If you have last time I checked, that's a part of your CV. If I put on my CV, I've been interviewed 6 times by the BBC, and guess what? More organizations are going to want to hire me. Okay. It's called experience. Yeah. It means not only are you a good communicator, you're actually going to give us some decent press. Last time I checked, that wasn't called DEI. It's amazing how they've renamed everything that we used to classify as skills, work experience, and merit has now been classified. When a black person does it, it's all classified as DEI. Your work experience. So, what qualifications has he got? Nothing else matters. Yeah, because every workplace you go into, they go straight to your qualifications, and no one looks at your work experience, right? No one looks at your achievements, right? No one looks at the things that you've done, your extracurricular, no, all of that. They're not interested in. All they want to know is what grade did you get on your degree. Everybody knows the world doesn't work that way, except when you're black. When you're black, everything you do, everything that you've accumulated through blood, sweat, and tears can be boiled down to DEI, even though often it's been the opposite of DEI has been our experience. This is the thing. Shout out to Tuko Pamoja. Appreciate you very much for your $5. Thank you very much. And I hope I said your name correctly. Where's that name from? I'd like to know. Tuko Pamoja. I don't know where that's from. I'd love to know where that name's from, but I appreciate your £5. What have you missed? Not much. We're just kind of going through and we're having a bit of fun with this. Feel free to chime in the chat.
So they couldn't just let him be like an average, everyday academic. Everyone had to turn him into this massive figure, which then resulted in him inevitably being torn down. Or not inevitably, but like, racists will do what racists do. He certainly made up a lot of shit that likely never happened, like all these charitable donations that he did and stuff like.
So once again, I think the certainty with which they're saying he's made stuff up, once again, that comes from that fatigue that I was talking about earlier, of being overloaded with so much negative press. You think that person has definitely done something wrong. The example I always give is Meghan Markle. Everybody is kind of like, oh, well, I don't think she's as bad as they make up. But I mean, she's just so what? You've never met her, you dumbass. You've never met the woman once in your life. She's never done anything that I wouldn't classify as graceful, less than graceful. She's never done anything less than graceful in the media spotlight once. She's considered about her words. She's considerate. She's kind. She's everything that you'd want someone who's stepping into a position of nobility to be. But it's never good enough because the British media are racist dogs. And so everybody's like, oh, Meghan, she's such a witch. She killed my son. The woman hasn't done anything. They haven't learned anything from the way they treated Princess Di. They haven't learned this hater. And that's the thing, is this middle ground where people think operating in the middle ground of the mainstream media take is the safe space. It is the opposite of the safe space because they lie with impunity. So when you're sitting in the middle ground, you're sitting in a cesspool of lies, and people don't understand that.
That his biography is certainly super fucking embellished, but it's not like the work that he produced was necessarily bad within the field that he's in. It's standard. It's normal. There's nothing particularly wrong about it. The thing that he maybe didn't deserve to be in the position that he's in is to have like this massive media furor around him. And that's what made him a target. That's what, like, just fucking look at what happened. The guy who targeted him, basically the entire reason why this happened is because he was singled out for this sort of scrutiny by exactly the sort of person he would imagine would single him out. What started all of this was a Substack post by Nathan Cofnas, an academic who was previously embroiled in a free speech row at Cambridge after he suggested in a blog post that in a meritocracy, there would be close to 0 black professors at Harvard. Cofnas, a self-defined race realist, was sacked by Cambridge's Emmanuel College in 2024 and underwent a disciplinary investigation into the blog post about black.
And to be clear about this is how bad it was with Cofnas, who actually is the privilege hire, so to speak. We need to think of a term for white males who are unqualified getting positions, because that really is the phenomena. It's the same thing like with that term anti-S, yeah? They create a term to distract you from the real phenomena, which is the real problem that deserves its own term. Anti-black racism is the most pervasive, most unjust, and most persistent form of anti-group racism that exists in the world. Everybody is aware of that, but we don't have a word for it. Yeah, we don't have a word for it. It's just called racism. We just have to define it alongside Asians and alongside Mexicans and alongside even you know who's. Yeah, we got to define it alongside everyone. We don't have our own word for that overriding phenomena, which is the worst. Every single group holds this against us, this prejudice against us. One of the examples I even give is, you know, for instance, people who are like pro-Palestine, for instance, yeah, racism exists in Palestine. Yeah. So even if even right now, as all of that persecution exists, those people who live there have still got time to be anti-black against their native black population. Do you understand? So there's a native black population that receive anti-black racism from within that nation whilst they're being persecuted. So it doesn't matter what situation you're in. So for instance, even if you're in Palestine, if you're a black person in Palestine, your life is worse than a normal person in Palestine. So that means, in spite of everything, the worst form is always anti-blackness. And we've almost come to a position where, or a place where we feel uncomfortable raising this, but we need our own term. We need our own term, because otherwise it gets grouped together in this kind of like meaningless millie, and all of these other groups are the ones who get to define what they go through. You know, that's what really annoys me, you know. Let me give a quick shout out to Ekene Okere. Thank you very much, Ekene. He says, as a matter of fact, DEI doesn't exist in the UK. Absolutely correct. We have EDI. That distinction is important, and nobody saying DEI is just transporting culture war. Sorry, and anybody, saying DEI is just transporting culture wars from the USA and shows how racist UK media is. Exactly. Because even the UK media, such an important point you just raised there, thank you for your £10. Even the UK media is using the term DEI. In fact, they use the term DEI and woke. And the moment you hear anyone in the UK say woke or DEI, which are both American or US phenomena, you know they're being racist. You know they're just sucked into this racist media, or are just active participants in these anti-black groups that most of these people are secretly members to. You know, this anti-black racism is rife. So yes, DEI is not a UK thing, it's EDI, and those of us in the UK know it's entirely useless. And it did have a point in time where there was progress being made, but that got dismembered and dismantled probably 10 to 15 years ago now. It's been like UK organizations. You can go to, I've mentioned this before and I'll mention it again. If you go into central London, you can find multiple organizations that have 100% white cohort. And there's no UK law, there's no diversity, impetus that is pressing them to place people who are of color or place people who are black. There's nothing in place. So a lot of people are trying to push this whole DEI narrative. It doesn't exist in the UK. If organizations want to be all white in the UK, they can be all white. This isn't back 20 years ago where diversity laws actually meant something and they thought to themselves, oh, let's make sure we have 3% or something to reflect. Now it's kind of like, nah, we'll just be white and we're good with that. Yeah, there's nothing pushing them in the UK. In the UK, literally, if they hire a black person, that black person is only there out of merit. That is the only possibility. They were just the best person for the job. That's it. And so people making this kind of DEI argument is actually laughable, because diversity in the UK died a long time ago. So I would say I'm surprised, but people are being funded to push this. But I am surprised at how stupid the general public is in parroting DEI or even thinking that it exists. It's kind of like, ask any English person, tell me one situation, just one, how DEI negatively impacted your life. Ask them. Ask any English person, tell me one situation where you can speak of where DEI negatively impacted your life, where someone you know lost out to DEI, and then wait for a response from these idiots. Anyway, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Let's carry on.
Academics. Like, he decided to target him, right? Like, he was fired from Cambridge, and he's like, you know what? I was fired for being racist. I'm gonna target this black academic at Cambridge to get back at them. So he put Arday's PhD thesis through plagiarism detection software, which found that what I went over earlier happened. Now, Mr. Nathan Cofnas is a Jewish Zionist, Jewish supremacist, and apparently a white supremacist as well. And here is him talking about his motivations for targeting Mr. Arday.
Now, Arday was special. The reason Arday is getting a lot of attention is he took the plagiarism, which is fairly common in academia, too far. And he told these crazy lies about his personal life.
So he just said there he took the plagiarism too far, the unproven plagiarism. So here's what's funny about these dishonest demons and devils. Yeah, the plagiarism has been thrown out. He knows at this point when he's making this speech that the plagiarism doesn't hold any weight. In fact, as an academic, he knows, if he's honest, that the plagiarism being restricted to the literature review and just being a situation where a couple of citations should have been made better, and perhaps some of the loosely paraphrased words should have been slightly more tightly, in terms of either putting them in quotations or making the paraphrases a little bit more distant from the original work. It's a literature review. He's very aware of this. He's not an idiot. He's done PhD thesis before. He's done research before. So he knows he's lying here. He 100% is aware that he's lying, but he has an agenda. And I have a more detailed piece coming out about Nathan Cofnas soon, but he has an agenda, and his agenda is to do this anti-black attack on Jason Arday and the entirety of Cambridge, because the mere existence of Jason Arday literally causes his entire life's work to be disproven, because his whole ideology is based on the idea that black people aren't able to attain that level of academic prowess. They're not able to attain that kind of that level of understanding, that level of intelligence, that level of education. It's beyond them in his world. So this kind of flies in the face. And what's really interesting, actually, I've got another piece, but I was on a friend of mine, I say a friend, I haven't talked to him for a little while now, Clive Granderson's page, and some of you will be subscribed to him. And he spoke about this whole race equals intelligence fallacy. And obviously you guys know I've done my documentaries on IQ. Another interesting tidbit I'll throw out as well, Nathan Cofnas's book was published by Richard Lynn. Now, those of you who've watched my documentaries on this channel should know who Richard Lynn is. Richard Lynn's the guy who literally published the stupid rubbish study on IQ, the absolute quackery pseudoscience where he was literally grabbing Africans from anywhere, refugee camps, wherever it is, giving them tests that weren't even in English, and then using, a handful of people, 5, 6, to be a representation of an entire nation. And for those of you who think I'm exaggerating, that's literally what he did for Somalia. He found a handful of refugees in a Kenyan refugee camp. He found a group of Somalians, made them take the test in a foreign language, and then that didn't tell them what the implications of the test were, anything like that. And then the results of that test was what makes the Somalian score, which is why the Somali score is like down at 65. And oh my God, Somali people are they're borderline functional human beings. That's what racists will say. An idiot with such foul, bad faith, you can't even call that academics, just a piece of shit like that. That's where he had to get his book published. Yeah, he had to get his book published by that. Yeah, because he couldn't find a reputable publisher to publish his nonsense. He had to find Richard Lynn. So once again, that circle jerk of racists, he belongs in that circle. Richard Lynn, who looks like Quasimodo, Richard Lynn, whose twisted, deformed body would be the first that would be filtered out if we lived in a Spartan world. He would have been thrown off a cliff at birth. And yet these people think they have the temerity to sit there talking about racial superiority. It's absolutely hilarious. But anyway, let's carry on. Actually, let me just give a quick another shout out to Tuko Pomoja. I think that's how you say it, know. Yeah, Tuko Pomoja. Thank you very much. I appreciate the £5 contribution. Didn't leave a comment, but it's much appreciated. Let's carry on.
And he had such an exalted position that the mismatch between the quality and the prestige was so enormous that there was a hook for a story. That was what was special about him. Not that he's a fraud, not that he's a worthless scholar. It's that there was a story. There was a basis for a news story that would capture people's attention. But, you know, there's...
You see, even he acknowledges that Arday's case isn't like particularly exceptional.
But even the way he's talking here, there's the basis for a news story that should capture attention. Is that your role as an academic? To be looking out for, hey, there's a news story that could catch attention here, and I could use this to potentially put... You're literally... That's called conspiracy. Last time I checked, is that not called conspiracy? So he's planning and plotting, thinking that, actually, let me plug away with this. I know he hasn't plagiarized, but if I keep plugging away with this, this story could unfold really well because it folds into the DEI narrative and this, that, and the other. That literally is called conspiracy. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like he was measuring and balancing these different variables and seeing something that, in spite of it being not true, would be taken up by the media because of all of the talking points that suit the current political ideology. That is conspiracy. So, like I said, I like the fact that Nathan Cofnas talks so much. He's one, you know, I think that the phrase going around the community at the moment is chatty patty. He is a chatty patty, just like Andrew Tate, yeah, a self-snitcher, going around all of these talk. And I guarantee you, this is part of the reason why he got fired from Ghent University, and they're also now reviewing whether or not his appointment was. Yes, I said that earlier. I almost forgot. We need to come up with a phrase for white male DEI. Okay, that's not DEI. We've come up with a phrase and use it all the time because they are the #1 recipients of unearned positions in the world globally, and that's without any level of kind of like, there's no dispute there. Yeah, they are the #1 recipients of unearned positions globally, and that's actually one of the things that causes the greatest inequality in this world, is the fact that we live in this, you know, world where either through nepotism or just through some good old racial politics, yeah, they will not hire outside of their group, and that even includes women a lot of the time with these things. So someone said old boys club. I like that. I want something a bit more derogatory personally. I want OBCs. Oh, I mean, it's got a nice abbreviation to it, OBCs. But keep plugging some ideas, guys. We need a word to describe white male privilege when it comes to hiring and getting unearned, undeserved positions, because they are the ones who cry for meritocracy, but they don't want meritocracy, because in a meritocracy they would only make up 30% of the workforce in the US, and in the UK they'd only make something like 40% of the workforce, whereas in most of these places, both across the Atlantic and over here, they're closer to like 50, 60, 70, 80% sometimes white men. And it's not because they're the smartest. I was talking about Clive Grandison earlier. Okay, so he did a video and he spoke about the fact that, for instance, we have ethnic groups like the Igbo. Yeah, snow beast favoritism. That's too derogatory. We go from one side of the pendulum to the other. I was like, oh, BC, that's a bit too nice. Old boys club, like snow beast favoritism. Like, I can't co-sign that. Oh, I'm already suppressed, man. You're trying to get me super suppressed here, man. Come on, man. Work with me, man. Work with me, my brother. Yeah, give me something that's not gonna get me completely shut down as a channel. That's like them saying mudshot. We don't punch that low. We don't. That's how they talk. We don't talk like that. Yes. So Clive Grandison spoke about the fact that the Igbo, for decades now, who are Nigerian, obviously, have outperformed and this is at GCSE and A level. This doesn't cross over into higher education, further education, higher education. I always get confused. Higher education. This doesn't cross over into higher education. Further. Someone can remind me which ones. I can never remember which one's A level and which one's degree, higher or further. But anyway, it doesn't cross over to the degree level. Let's say level 6 and upwards, yeah, because that's where the racial limitations really start to push in, and that's where you'll get the gatekeeping really start to reflect in the numbers. Because a lot of time people don't do masters and they don't do PhDs unless they're encouraged to, really. So sometimes they will, but a lot of time, particularly with PhDs, you need to have a supervisor that favors you, someone who's in the faculty who says, oh, I think you should do this and we're willing to fund you and we'll put you on. And what I found talking to multiple Black PhDs and academics is actually they've always had people discourage them. So I don't think you'd be suitable for that. Why don't you try something else? Why don't you go to another department? All the time. Yeah, that happens all the time. So where gatekeeping becomes a factor over meritocracy, so where the scoring of people's academics is a meritocracy, the Igbo greatly outperform the average white Brit. And when I say greatly, I mean like 20%. It was in like around 2010, it was in the 20 percentile. So the Igbos were sitting at an average of like 80, I think it was like 83% or something when it came to like GCSE performance, and white Brit was sitting down at 63%. Now, bear in mind, this is adjusted for socioeconomics. These aren't rich Igbos. These are just like, some of them are working class, some of them are middle class, and that's it, like normal Black Brits. Yeah, we don't really have this massive corpus of really rich Black British people, like normal Black Brits. But yet the Igbo are massively outperforming. Even the Yoruba were outperforming the white Brits by about 10%. So you have these groups, and I'm not going to go through all of the different ethnic groups, but you have these groups that are clearly sitting outside of these racial norms. These kind of like, oh, well, you know, Black people are less intelligent. It's like, no, they're not. No, they're not. In fact, you'll find in certain ethnic groups actually massively outperform average white people. Okay, massively outperform them. So if you take the averages from two groups, like there's not even any competition. So that defeats the entirety of this kind of like hereditarianism argument based on race. It's clearly not racial. Okay, now that's not to say that also that it is genetic. So I'm not saying that these groups, Igbo, Yoruba, are genetically more interior. I'm saying, sorry, are more superior. What I'm explaining is the fact that there's so many more different variables at play, and race certainly isn't one of them. Race just doesn't fit. You can only start to pull down the Black attainment when you start to kind of like pull in these kind of like sporadic groups and this, that, and the other, and you know, you're pulling in data from elsewhere that hasn't been qualified, and then when you do all that, all of a sudden, oh, it goes down massively, and we can't verify exactly how you've managed to get at these averages. For instance, in Nigeria, if two of the largest ethnic groups in Nigeria routinely outperform white Brits in Britain under the same socioeconomic circumstances, how can you turn to Nigeria and say the average Nigerian IQ is like 20 IQ points below the average British IQ? It's a load of nonsense. I've taught in low attaining white schools. Yeah, I've taught in areas where you meet the most like incredibly intelligent people, and I've taught in areas where I've taught in schools where everybody was dumb. Yeah, everybody. I've taught in a school that didn't send anyone to university for 8 years in Useley. Yeah, you can Google that. It was like a national record. Yeah, I taught in that school. So people try to talk to me about kind of average IQ. It's like, no, you don't get it. You don't get it. It's not that simple, because you can go to areas where it's not like they're all related. Oh man. Oh, my internet got interrupted there, guys. Don't know what happened there. Maybe I didn't like what I was saying. But yeah, because I'm plugged in now. I've got Ethernet, so that shouldn't be happening. But yeah, I've taught in areas where the attainment is incredibly low, and that's just a an ethos across the area of low attainment where people didn't care about their studies and people weren't intelligent and people weren't smart. Okay, if I was to take an average IQ from an area like that, even to this day, take an average IQ from Usually, yeah, I guarantee you compare that to any African village, Usually will come up low. So we can all play this game of averages, and it's always the ones who look like Quasimodo who want to play the game of averages. It's always the ones who look like the ones who look like, you know, Danny DeVito in Twin, the ones who look like the rejected mitochondria. The ones who look like they are composed entirely from homozygosity. That's my polite way of saying inbreeding. It's these ones, yeah. It's always these ones, yeah, who want to make the racial argument. I mean, look at him. He looks like he sunburns indoors, yeah, and he wants to make the argument about racial superiority. Well, that's all you can cling on when look at you as a specimen. It's ridiculous. I hope some former students are watching the stream, yeah, because I believed in them in spite of that, to be very, very clear. But anyway, let's carry on.
Right? There's plenty of academics who, when you read their work, they come off like they're just saying random shit. And I'm not of the opinion, as many are, that, oh, you just, you know, you don't understand. No, a lot of the social sciences is this sort of dumb bullshit, worthless bullshit. However, the fact that he was singled out specifically, it's really fucking obvious why. The fact that, you know, there's this prominent black academic at Cambridge who was singled out. The fact that it was him rather than one of the, you know, thousands upon thousands of white academics publishing just drivel. It's fucking obvious why. And he tells you why. I mean, he's not exactly hiding it.
So many cases of people who are just like Arday, but, you know,
white, but white.
There isn't that kind of story potential. Well, maybe the lesson is this: what's happened if you don't give Cofnas a job, right?
Yeah, you got your own ways to retaliate. What are you going to do? Do you think you're going to finish your PhD, or no? You've already finished.
I was trying to find the comment. I could see it in one screen, and the screen that I can share comments on, I can't see it. But I like mediocre white hire, MWH. It's a bit of a mouthful with the acronym, but I like mediocre. I think Judy White sent it, but for some reason it's not showing up on my share. I feel like that. Is this being filtered out? I feel like my stream is being messed with. but I like Tim was like Neanderthal hire. I like mediocre white hire. I know why I like that, because it touches on the crux of the issue. You have these mediocre white men. I really do feel like the focus should be on men, because I even feel like, at least when it comes to white women, there is more of a case of meritocracy when they get their position. Do they get favor? Yes, but there's normally a merit, there's a deservedness in them being there. But I find it's normally with white men where it's that undeservedness of them being there. You know what I mean? You get, you know, friggin' John fresh out of uni, hired as the MD. We just really think he's got the talent, you know. Haven't seen it quite like that before. He just really blew me away. Hasn't got the experience, but I think he could take this organization forwards. That's mediocre white male hire. That feels like that's that. But we need a nice punchy way of saying that. Yeah, mediocre male. Triple M would be a good one. Bit of alliteration there. I don't know. Anyway, let us carry on.
You're just gonna.
No, I finished a long time ago.
Yeah. So what are you gonna do?
Well, I have the job currently, and I'm still waiting for the revolution to happen, and then I'll.
It's gonna take a while.
Get another job. After the revolution, I'll be the, the head of the Department of Eugenics and
the music,
Race Science at Harvard. Maybe.
So, and here's a guy who constantly pitches himself as well. For you to openly say you'll be the head of eugenics, like you made it clear you're a eugenicist. And that's not surprising, because he's a eugenicist. His book publisher, Richard Lim, was a eugenicist. He lightly got in a position, was pushed into that scholarship position, or that kind of like, fellowship position by Leverhulme because of his Zionist position. Like, this is a guy who doesn't want to merit his way. He wants to weasel and worm his way into different positions by rubbing shoulders with the right people, and then calling out black people who actually earn their position, calling them DEI. It's very interesting, isn't it?
Okay. I mean, he's clearly said he's like trying to cause a so-called revolution in academia to push out black people, right? It's not exactly subtle. It's hilarious too, because if you look at this guy's academic history, like half of his supposed work is him calling out other academics for anti-Semitic tropes. He goes around complaining about anti-Semitic tropes and anti-Semitism constantly all the time. And he's talking about how he wants to be the head of like race science and phrenology at Harvard after the revolution. The revolution. I wonder what kind of revolution that would be. It's fucking comical. This guy has papers where he debunks people who have written about like how like this one here right here is him debunking a paper written about how genetic and cultural adaptations among Jews constitute a group evolutionary strategy, and he is debunking it because it is anti-Semitic, right? Like half of his
and this is the irony. So most of his paper, he's got a few papers that are very kind of like I'm going to call them pro Z. You know what I'm talking about when I say that. And these papers are focused on debunking this guy called Kevin McDonald, who essentially wrote papers which have been largely kind of like, they're kind of largely refuted for being anti-Esitism, but they're true, okay? They're about the fact that the you-know-who-ish community basically sit on both sides of the fence. Okay, so they sit on both sides of the fence. So on the one hand, they're like, this is wrong, anti-S is wrong. But then he found that they had greater representation on the groups that were considered anti-Esitists. Yeah, they had massive representation here and less representation on the other side. So it's kind of like they're driving that conversation, and yet they have massive interest in those areas. They always have huge representation in the most racist groups. And so this Kevin McDonald wrote these papers, and he just kind of like broke down how divisive these people are, how they kind of like essentially sit at the apex of various different kind of like schools of thought, organizations, and they've always got massive representation on both sides of the argument. All right, so it's kind of like, what the hell is going on here? And they always sow. One of the things he mentions is that they always sow in division within the Gentile class. So they always kind of like, they push things they don't push in their own community. So they want them to be liberal, they want them to be this, they want them to be that, and they'll push all of these agendas through their people in the Gentile classes, but within their own community, they don't play with any of that. They don't have any of that liberalism. And so that's been exposed by this guy called Kevin McDonald. And what Nathan Cofnas has done in response to this is he's basically said this is anti-Semitic, which is what they always do. Okay, they always say, oh, it's anti-Semitic because you've rumbled, you've rumbled anti-Semitic. That's what they always do. You rumbled us, so you're anti-Semite. So he's kind of like come up with this paper, but then he's also not refuting the talking points that he needs. So if you look at the papers that he's done, he's done two papers, and on both of them, he's basically said the reason why we've got representation on both sides of the fence is because we're innately more intelligent. So this is Nathan Cofnas' argument. If you read the paper, he's going against anti-Semitism, but he's still using it as an opportunity to push his exceptionalism and his hereditarianism science. So he's like, oh no, we just got higher IQs, and therefore everything you're talking about are kind of intellectual pursuits, and so therefore it makes sense that we have high representation in politics and blah 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 and this, that, and the other, because they're all high intellect pursuits. So he's using it as an opportunity to forward his Zionist / hereditarianism ideology. So that's what he's doing there. Yeah, so this is what it's important that we understand, is because this is what his bibliography is. This is what he's produced. This is what he's written. It's all been based on this idea of superior or inferiority. And I actually think the attack against the anti-black attack is a distraction. It's an effort to distract white people from the fact that he's said on multiple papers that Jews have a higher average intelligence than white people, and to distract from this Kevin McDonald argument. Oh, let's it's the common enemy trope. It's one of the most useful tools. It's to get everybody focused on a common enemy, and that happens to be us, the black people. Oh, look at the black folk, look at the DEI, all woke. Look at the woke. Don't worry about us sowing discord in your communities. Don't worry about us playing both sides of the political spectrum. Don't worry about us starting all the wars and owning all of your organizations. Forget all of that. Look at these black people. Oh, DEI. Look at Jason Arday. How did he get his post there? Oh, look at him. Look at him. Oh, look at him. He's gonna make you homeless. Better attack those black people. All in the effort to distract everybody. They know exactly what they're doing. And Cofnas is a massive part of this cog. And I believe that's one of the reasons why the Leave a Home institutional, whatever you want to call it, fellowship, granted him this kind of like, gave him this kind of like this scholarship, this free, mediocre male upgrade, and basically guaranteed him employment in a highly established, well-renowned educational institution, because he was making sound bites and talking points and defenses that they needed an academic to raise. So that this is a very, very interesting backstory. Anyway, let's carry on.
Scholarly output is him complaining about anti-Semitism, and the other half is him talking about how black people are inferior. Here's a paper literally called The Anti-Jewish Narrative. Like, this guy's entire being is arguing with other race scientists because the other race scientists think that Jews are like evolutionary evil or whatever. And he comes in to this race science field and he's like, no, guys, we're on the team. We're just like you. Let me be included. And this is the guy who obviously targeted Jason Arday, a thoroughly unexceptional scholar, a average sort of guy in the social sciences these days, who was obviously targeted because he's black. Obviously.
And by the way, I find it, I don't know, he hasn't done this. I don't think he's done this on purpose, but Nathan Cofnas is a thoroughly average scholar. His ideas are not only unoriginal, his ideas are thoroughly pseudoscientific. Okay. Every time he's tried to publish something in an academic journal, it's been refuted broadly. Yes, they've been upheld and they're still there, but I mean, broadly refuted. Yeah. Massively. So there, if you're all looking for a scholar to, to undermine and say, oh, this person's unimpressive, you don't have to go any further. This is my issue with the Bad Empanada videos. You didn't have to go any further than Nathan Cofnas himself. His papers are nonsense, are absolute nonsense. The whole his paper where he's arguing against, Kevin McDonald, and he talks about, what's the phrase that he uses to describe kind of like the natural phenomena of essentially the whoish race, ascending to the top of these organizations. It's just nonsense. It's just like this, and that's one of his least. The irony is the papers that he did that were against anti-Semitism were the only ones that were well received. All the papers that he's done where he wasn't attacking Kevin McDonald or attacking somebody, where it's just kind of like, here's some scholarship that I've done of warranted of itself, have all been refuted. Like, it's all been kind of like, what the hell is this 18th century, 19th century racial sciences claptrap, this kind of like scientific racist nonsense? That's what he is, the most unexceptional scholar in this discussion. We didn't need to go any further than him,
because he could be, he could be made an example of. And this guy is obviously, and the others like him who did this to him, are obviously the primary people who should be blamed, but also the institutions have to be blamed as well. Like, the institutions who are just trying to get quick and easy identity politics points by like elevating a thoroughly average black scholar to a level where, yeah, he really is.
Stop saying that. Once again, you don't know him. And once again, it's the assumption there. It's the assumption that's bothering me. You're just assuming he's an average black scholar. I know you're saying that because you're seeing another video. He goes through one of Dr. Arday's papers, and it's the level of disengagement he has with the subject matter for him to just basically dismiss things as being thoroughly kind of like, disconnected and jargon and all of these derogatory terms given to words that he can't engage with because he doesn't understand or empathize with the deeper meaning behind what's being discussed. Just because someone, for instance, piles, 4 complicated terms on top of one another doesn't make the sentence meaningless. There's a a reason why these scholars are speaking in a certain way. And we'll come on to that in a moment.
He realistically probably shouldn't have been like a professor at Cambridge with like this fairly prominent media profile where he was using it as an example of stuff. But I mean, that still doesn't mean that he should be hounded into fucking suicide by a bunch of race scientists. It's like this collision between two currents that are both wrong, though obviously one in a worse way.
No. And this, once again, it's that middle ground. So you remember I said to you earlier, guys, about this middle ground. You have this spectrum of BS that has been pumped out by the media, and you think, if you're, oh, well, the middle ground is, oh, well, you know, they're both wrong. No. We don't have to take on. We don't have to, you know, accept the projection of foul play because the media has been pumping out nonsense. You know, the media will like nothing more. For instance, I know I keep going back to this analogy, but they would like nothing more than for Meghan Markle to come out and say, "I'm so sorry." She got an American accent, but anyway, if she came out, she was like, "I'm so sorry for the way I've treated the British public. I've been absolutely vile to you. It's just been a," and they would all go, "Oh, it's fine, Meghan. We forgive you." Well, she doesn't need to apologize because the British public are shit. They're horrible. They're vile. They're disgusting. They're in the wrong. They owe her an apology. There is no middle ground to this discussion. All of these British people who've attacked this woman for absolutely no other reason than being of color and married to someone who they didn't think she's deserved to be married to need to apologize. They owe her an apology. It's never going to be the other way around. You don't deserve an apology. You're not going to get one. And the same way in this whole Jason Arday thing, it's not, oh, well, he's wrong. No, he's not wrong. He's a scholar that is approaching his specialism. Nathan Cofnas is a quack who's trying to bring down a scholar because he thinks it will make for entertaining news. There's no middle ground here. What are you talking about?
Than the other, and that is of like the liberal weaponization of identity politics versus the like Jewish fucking supremacists in this case, not just white supremacists, but also Jewish supremacists, race scientists in the worst way possible. With the liberal identity politics, if anything, giving the assist to the race scientists in this instance by...
It's not liberal identity politics. You're not black, so you don't understand it. And you don't get to frame it that way. And this is the thing. Everybody thinks... here. What you're experiencing here, by the way, is a projection as well. Okay? Because for a lot of these guys, and no offense, talking about this stuff, talking about Palestine, when Bad Empanada wakes up in the morning, talking about Palestine is a choice. Okay? It's not something that personally impacts his life. And when he goes to sleep at night, if he woke up one day and said, "I'm not doing this anymore," and Palestinian people continue to get, you know, bombed and this, that, and the other, nothing's going to change in his life. He'll be absolutely fine. He'll be like, off to work, whatever, carry on experiencing his semi-white privilege. I'm not going to assume that he's fully white, but he's white passing. I think we can all agree. Okay, so he's got to carry on just enjoying his life. No thingies, you know. So for him, when people write papers or they stand up or they make a stand or they make a protest, it's just identity politics. It's identity politics to the person who doesn't live within that. Jason Arday was black. It's not identity politics for him. It literally was his life. You're talking about our lives. Yeah. So Palestine is an option for you. For a Palestinian, it's not an option. They wake up and they're living in apartheid. They're living in a separatist state. Okay, there's no option there. They can't just turn it off and turn it on. Oh, look at this Palestinian identity politics. It's not identity politics. You don't get to opine. You don't get to talk about our experiences as black people living in this anti-black world, and in particular in the UK as a black academic. You are literally living on the cusp. Not cusp, wrong word. You're literally living at the paramount. You are paramount to being literally just over the edge of like this, all of this negative racist energy that is being pushed your way. Everything that you're saying and doing is being policed from every single angle. You do not understand that experience. You never will understand that experience. You think that academia is this kind of meritocratic world where you can just get anywhere you can as long as you're... No, black people get policed. You'll find that most of the black PhDs in the UK have to pick up some kind of black in their topic to either get a PhD or to even get a professorship. They have to do, you know, I think you should do, you know what I think you should do? Why don't you do, like, all the white people, and to less extent, all the Asians, they get to just do their PhD in whatever they like. The black person has to do their frigging PhD. Why don't you do your PhD on race and physics? Yeah, I think it'd be really good for race and physics. Oh no, I don't want to do race and physics. I want my PhD to be about, you know, the rings around Saturn. I've got this really cool. Oh no, I don't think that works for you. I don't think that would work for you. That's not the kind of thing. Oh well, how about the possibility of race of aliens being having racial hierarchy? You know, this is what you don't understand. Yeah, we are literally siphoned into these very tiny pockets of research. They force black people to explore these pockets of research that they're willing to supervise us to do. They don't allow us to have that broad spectrum. So you don't get to call our researchers, you don't get to call our academics identity politics when they're forced into these very limited schools of thought, because you don't understand it. And it's actually similar to some extent. It is similar in other parts of Europe as well. But anyway, that's let me let this carry on.
Having created like an environment where this sort of thing was possible. Every year, there are dozens upon dozens of academic scandals, most of them far more severe than this. But it was played up in part because the guy sort of, you know, Arday sort of sniffed his own farts quite a bit and played up his own story quite a bit, way too much, really, beyond the academic sphere. But I mean, he was pushed into that position.
Once again, I'll just answer this by saying unexceptional people find the lives of exceptional people to read like fiction. And the best analogy I can give you is when, you know, you see an in-shape athlete and then there's always a school of fat, potato chip chugging, couch surfing, milkshake, you know, milkshake guzzling, cookie sneaking individuals who turn around and go, I bet you they're on PEDs. Or I've seen it before. That is impossible. No one can have that physique naturally. It's impossible. No one can have that physique naturally. He is on PEDs. I've seen it before. Definite peds. Coming from the person who's never done exercise in their life. The lives of unexceptional people will always read like fantasy tales to so the lives of exceptional people will always read like fantasy to people who are unexceptional. That is just a fact.
He was propped up and put into this position by the British media as well. I said earlier, but you can compare this to Hassan Piker. Obviously, it's not an analogous situation. They're not academics or anything, but Hassan Piker is being propped up by the media in a way that he obviously doesn't deserve. But you can see how intoxicating it is because he's lapping it up every step of the way, obviously. And I think most people would lap it up every step of the way. So you can't really fault Jason Arday for having done so as well. But
by the way, speaking here, I can also tell that he's not very familiar with Jason Arday, because although Jason Arday when I say entertained, he entertained media as in like he was willing. He wasn't like he's not a Hassan Piker. He didn't have like his own channel and was putting out daily. No, he just engaged media where it occurred. He was happy to engage it. He was I think he was someone who was happy to be so articulate, particularly given his past, given his non-verbal childhood. I think he was really happy that he had managed to advance himself so quickly through the education system, through merit, through hard work, through dissertations, PhDs, original research. And he liked telling his story. His story was encouraging. His story was uplifting, not just to black people, to everybody. That's an uplifting story. Yeah. So he had this entire backstory that was incredibly uplifting. And as a result of that, people did like to interview him. Okay. He did it, but it wasn't this kind of like craven, oh, he used the media. You hear them say that in the UK. Oh, he used the media for his benefit. So it's only fair that the media take him down. It's like, no, he didn't use the media. He wasn't like some perpetually online personality. He had a job to do, and he was very good at the job that he did. This is another false narrative. So this is a false narrative that's being pushed out.
Overall, like, there's nothing to learn from this. They'll learn nothing from this. The most actionable thing to learn from this would be careful like for the liberal institutions and such, be careful about the shit that you do purely in the name of identity politics, because it can very easily just end up giving ammo to those who you at least claim to be ideologically opposed to. And also, like, of fucking course, the guy is this massive Zionist Israeli. Well, he's not Israeli apparently, but he sure loves Israel. He might as well be. Unsurprising that this guy has an extensive post-history defending Israel. He's a Jewish white supremacist, and a white supremacist. Like, literally, I looked at his scholarly output.
Agree with both of those takes. He absolutely is. Both of the things that Bad Empanada just said there. Agree 100% with those takes.
Half of it is race science. The other half is arguing with the other race scientists about how Jews should be in the club. It's insane. It's crazy as fuck. And
he's arguing beyond the fact that Jews should be in the club. He's actually arguing quite clearly that they are a superior intellect and they are in the club, and you need to deal with the fact that they're in the club because they're there by merit. So here's the thing. The Jews are there by merit of their superior intellect, as opposed to the blacks who are there by DEI policies. So even in his kind of like non-hereditarian papers, he's still pushing the same argument. Yeah, it's as you have to read the papers to understand that's the crux of essentially what he's saying. He's saying, no, it's we're there by merit. Yeah, this guy's claiming that we're there because we've got this overriding plan. But actually, we're there by merit.
of course, the race scientists, like, he looks like fucking Goebbels. They're always the worst possible examples of their supposed superiority.
Okay, cool. All right, let's move on to the next video. This one is a little bit more. I know we're about an hour and a half in, but I did want to. Yeah, I'm not going to do another Bad Empanada video, so might as well dive into the second one. If you've got the stomach for a bit of a marathon, feel free. I feel like I've touched on a lot of the points that I want to touch on, to be totally honest with you, in terms of his interpretation. And like I said before, this isn't kind of like I'm coming for Bad Empanada, because as you can see, I haven't got a lot of people have got a lot of negative sentiment towards him. I'm kind of like, to me, it's just another, like, I don't expect much outside of our community. So it's not like I'm looking to him and expecting for him to see the world through my lens. I'm not expecting it. I do think he sits on the better half of you know, those who sit outside of our community. But many of you have expressed the fact that he has these kind of like anti-black sentiments. So I'm not promoting him either, but I'm just using him very much as a proxy to have this larger discussion about how people who are not from the UK, and particularly not black and from the UK, are interpreting what's taking place in the Jason Arday case and what they're getting wrong. And I think this is quite an effective tool for us to just kind of like look through what he says and measure it against all of the other signals that we're receiving. Okay, so let's you sound familiar with Professor Sunday. I don't know who Professor Sunday is. Let's carry on, guys. Okay, this is the one actually
Even came to be in the first place, and what colonialism and imperialism even is today. Because
okay, I've got to bring this one back. I've actually watched about, as you can see, about 3/4 of this one already. So let's get into this one. And my real problem with this one, and I might as well kind of like tell you before I launch into it, is I came into this one, I was really quite encouraged. I saw the thumbnail and I thought it was going to be this really excellent takedown of Nathan Cofnas, which is what's deserved. This is what we want to see. We want to see Nathan Cofnas taken down. We want to see people kind of like really exposing his academic background, his pseudoscientific outlook, his racial hate theories, which is exactly what they are, his nonsense, and exposing it for the crap that it is. And he only does it for like the first quarter of the video, and then after that, the entirety of the rest of the video is him once again coming against Dr. Arday's scholarship and talking about it being identity politics and being worthless. But he makes so many arguments that I think are incorrect that I would like to go through them with you guys. I think it's important we go through these arguments, because what you'll find is that these will be arguments that are going to be repeated. So this is why I kind of want to address them. I like to address these arguments in one place so I can say, look, in the future, I've spoken about this. Feel free to refer to this video. But let's get into this second video now. So this is now a different video, by the way, guys.
So last week I covered the academic in the UK, Jason Arday, who was bullied into suicide by a race scientist, a feeble little Jewish supremacist race scientist. And now that race scientist has finally been suspended from his role at Ghent University it was. Now, how he actually ended up being employed there is a question that should probably be asked. And not because he's a race scientist, mind you. Like, there are plenty of racists in universities who perhaps aren't as blatant as him, though many of them are. I mean, fucking Gad Sad, for example, is like a esteemed professor of marketing. The reason why he was suspended, and it's ridiculous, is only happening because of the Arday stuff, because it's clear that he was violating every single thing about his employment contract with them before this. Like, his research mandate with the university was, I quote, on the future of liberalism, specifically focusing on liberalism as a political doctrine, emphasizing individual freedom and equality. But on the guy's blog, he was like constantly saying, yep, I'm researching race science at Ghent University. Like they say, the projects you publicly and repeatedly associate with your affiliation at Ghent University, most notably your Guide to the Hereditarian Revolution, which advocates for racial barriers and segregation, fall entirely outside the scope of your official research mandate.
So it's important to note, okay? So he's at Ghent University and he's supposed to be essentially researching liberalism. Imagine that. Nathan Cofnas is supposed to be there researching and adding to the research and discourse around liberalism and equality. And he's there and his actual topics of focus are race realism, hereditarianism, eugenics. You know, he's openly saying this. Like I said, this guy snitches on himself. He's an idiot. He can't stop blogging. He can't stop tweeting. He can't stop taking interviews. This is what he wants to do. He clearly wants to be an online personality. He doesn't have the personality for it, but he clearly sees himself as being an online personality. You know, he that's what he wants to do. And yet he had a role that he's doing the exact opposite. I'm telling you, I actually love 2026 for this, for the fact of how much these people in these certain positions self-snitch and they talk constantly about the crimes they've committed. Because as an academic, like I said, I think there's a line that he's crossed in the realm of harassment that just does need to be addressed. And I'd like to see him at least, you know, indicted or something like that, or at least investigated to some degree.
Like, yeah, he got hired to research, like, basically political science slop, right? Like modern, generic, liberal political science slop. He's supposed to be talking about how liberalism emphasizes freedom and equality. But what he's instead doing is publicly posting on his blog about how he's researching race science. So that he lasted this long is interesting. That he was hired in the first place is interesting as well. I seriously doubt this guy has much of a publication history when it comes to liberalism as a political doctrine emphasizing individual freedom and equality. That he was hired in the first place is very sketchy. Now, you guys have to be very careful about getting people fired from shit because they are abhorrent morons with shitty views, because it's obviously going to be used against you way more, you know? Like, this guy's an abhorrent moron with shitty views, but if he was actually in his university life working on the things that he was supposed to be working on, then I would say it's a bit iffy to fire him. But in this case, he's like just blatantly lying about what he's researching.
See, the problem is in the UK, that would be like trying to friggin' soak up the ocean with a sponge. You know, that's the problem with the UK. Like, you'd be up against like, we know, like, we've put up with characters in the UK like Dr. David Starkey, who's fuller. I think he got fired recently. I think we're all aware he got fired in and around the 2020s because he made a statement that if World War II, if enough black people died in World War II, there wouldn't be so many damn blacks left over. Something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing awfully here. Well, he got fired eventually for that. But this is a man who, in the run up to that statement, made racist statements over and over and over and over again, and remained in education, remained a senior professor, remained, you know, this is someone who couldn't help himself. When he's on television, he would say something negative about black people. Once again, it was always anti-black. It wasn't just anti-immigrant. It was always anti-black. For some reason, the very tiny 3%, 3 to 4% population that we occupy in the UK seemed to bring a real disturbance to his life. And this is the reason why, like, we wouldn't even bother in the UK trying to fight against, you know, a lot of the time, this kind of like this torrent of racist people in academia. You know, academia in the UK is literally founded on racism. Many universities were established during colonialism for colonialism. Okay, I'm sure many of you Sorry, my connection lost there. I think I'm back now. I was saying during that period of colonialism, I think the number of universities either 5 or 10x in the UK, okay, because they needed to train colonists. That's why education exists, to train racist people how to run the world. Yeah, that's why a lot of them are established. The School of Oriental and African Studies is not some cool woke school where they study all so groovy, man, Orient. No, it was a place where they trained colonists. That's why it's called the School of Oriental and African Studies. Up until even recently, I think they still do it. You can do your degree course, wherever you're doing it, you can do it and learn Yoruba, or you can do it and learn Igbo, or you can do it and learn Gujarati. Yeah, so your degree will be, you know, mathematics and Yoruba. Why do you think they teach you that? Oh, because they're groovy and woke? No, because they were training colonists. Yeah, that's why these establishments were even set up. So a lot of that resides in these institutions. Those professors didn't suddenly disappear at the end of World War One. They were replaced by people that they hired, and they were replaced by people that they hired. And we've got this long legacy in the UK of people in these professorships, in these senior positions, that come from this legacy of racism. That is just a fact. Okay. Anyway, let's carry on. Shout out, Joe. I'll catch you later.
Researching to make it look like he was hired by the university to like research how to reinstitute segregation and race laws and shit. So that's kind of a slam dunk against him. But, you know, as I said, if you think that if there is like a purge of people with like racist views, even hidden racist views in fucking imperialist first world universities, that exact same logic of excluding those people isn't going to be used against you a billion times worse, you're a fucking moron. You've seen what's been happening over the last few years with Gaza. You know, these liberal institutions are much more tolerant of racism than they are of anti-hegemonic, anti-imperialist positions. So giving them like a license to pick and choose who they want to get rid of based on their views, abhorrent as they may be, is something that is much more to your disadvantage than it is to their disadvantage, to the disadvantage of the right wing. But yeah, it's I don't even like, what is this guy's actual research specialization? Because last time I covered him very briefly, I looked at some of his publications, and he was all like complaining about how other race scientists think that Jews are like bad, and he was like, actually Jews are great. Like his bibliography on Wikipedia lists 3 publications. Hold on, let me look at his Google Scholar. Should dietary guidelines recommend low red meat intake? Is vegetarianism healthy for children? Does activism in social science explain conservatives' distrust of scientists? Science is not always self-correcting. Scientific literacy, optimism about science and conservatism. Research on group differences in intelligence, a defense of free inquiry. This guy has absolutely 0 publication history on liberalism. None of his publications are on liberalism at all. So how was he hired in the first place for a position that is about like basically political science or like political philosophy?
And that's one of the things that's being investigated at the moment. Like I said, his hiring, everybody knows. Like, so imagine the irony of this. He's talked about Dr. Arday being hired and it being this huge controversy, and him saying, oh, it's a DEI hire, he doesn't deserve to be in the position, based purely on the fact that he doesn't like the color of his skin. Okay, I think everyone can agree with that. It doesn't match his ideology. He doesn't think he's intelligent enough to be in that position. So he's raised these false accusations. But all that aside, you've got into a position that not only are you underqualified for, you have no experience in, and you've just wandered in with your mediocre male white privilege. Just wandered right in there. Yeah, wandered right in there. That's what I'm trying to think of an acronym, because I think we have to come up with something. MWP, mediocre white privilege. You've just wandered in there with your mediocre white privilege. I like MWP because it sounds like MVP. I'll play with that for a while. Let me know what you think of that. Yeah, so you just wandered in there with your NWP, your mediocre white privilege, just wandered into a job you have no experience in. Why have you done that? And, you know, still had the temerity to speak so loudly about another academic who shouldn't be in that position? That's because you've done that your whole life. The thing about these mediocre whites is that they do it their entire life. So they don't even realize they're doing it. What's happening to them feels like meritocracy. What are you talking about? I applied. I applied like him. I applied like everybody else. Of course I got the job. That's how it works. Yeah, that's how it works in their world. Yeah, I applied and I got the job. You know, of course. Why wouldn't I get the job? I did apply. Application equals hired in the mediocre white privilege world. So everyone else, application times 50 equals one interview. Yeah, so you see the difference. Yeah, he's wandered into this job, becoming the lead researcher or whatever, professor of friggin' neoliberalism, and the dude doesn't have a single article. He literally writes about the opposite topic. You couldn't make this stuff up. He is perfect. He is absolutely perfect for the treatment that Dr. Arday got. Absolutely perfect. If there was any justice in this world, in the words of Lamar, if there was any justice in this world, he would be the one that's getting dragged through the media right now. In fact, the media should be making 100 articles a day about Nathan Cofnas, but don't hold your breath. This is the UK.
Philosophy, researching liberalism. So yeah, the fact that he was hired in the first place is ridiculous. Apart from that, I also wanted to elaborate on why I think Jason Arday's work is also subpar. Not particularly because Jason Arday himself was.
So there you go. So look at this. This is a 40-minute video. The thumbnail is Cofnas, and I kind of feel irritated by this because I was catfished into watching this video. Yeah, the clickbait was sensational. I was like, oh great, we're gonna see a Cofnas takedown. He spends the entirety of the entire runtime of this video now coming at Jason Arday, Dr. Jason Arday's research and scholarship, which I found really irritating. But what's more annoying than the fact that I feel like I was kind of like clickbaited into this video, what's even more annoying is that the critique that he raises, once again, it just smacks of privilege. He doesn't understand the thing that he's trying to critique. So we'll touch on a bit of this. I doubt we'll get through all of it because I don't think we'll need to. I think after we've done a few minutes of it, you'll kind of get the gist of what's taking place here.
Subpar within his field, but because the field itself is subpar. Because a lot of people were very, very angry at the
Kalugu, to answer your question, it's going to be M for mediocre, not N for Neanderthal. Okay, we have to maybe we'll keep it Neanderthal within the circles. Okay, if you join the academy, yeah, you can use Neanderthal there, no problem. Okay, we're not pleased over there. Okay, or on Patreon, feel free. This is a plug. Okay, support me on Patreon, support me in my academy, even my YouTube community, but in public, it's going to be MWP, okay? Mediocre white privilege. That's what we're going to call it. It's good.
Notion that I don't respect the sort of stuff that he published, that I don't pretend that he was like this eminent professor at the forefront of his field as he was often presented in the media. Like,
you're not the target audience. So that straight away is the issue. Once again, you can't profess to have specialism about stuff you don't know anything about. So for instance, if someone was going to publish papers on friggin' astrophysics, I can't sit there as a non-astrophysicist and be like, oh, you know, I don't profess that he was the brilliant mind that people thought he was, because I'm not a specialist in that field. I'm not even moderately interested in that field enough to have an opinion that is weighty. I don't have the right to kind of like weigh in on the topics being discussed because most of them are going to go over my head or I have no kind of connection to. Now, this is the problem with the social sciences, is that everybody feels like they have the right to kind of like jump in and rubbish someone's work, even when they haven't done the least amount of time to kind of like understand, yeah, what exactly is being discussed on the paper. They haven't tried to engage the topic. They just read it and they go, oh, too much jargon, too many, you know, meaningless words here. It doesn't make any sense. It's like, no, maybe it does make sense. You don't understand it. That's another possibility.
Like, I believe I described it as like wankery. And I think that is a fair characterization still. And I will go over some of his scholarship here to explain to you why I think that. So if we look at Arday's Google Scholar profile here, it has a list of his publications. The top one is an edited book that he curated. So it's not actually his publication. It's a book that he was an editor on. So his most cited publication, aside from people citing an edited book, is this next one. Attempting to break the chain, reimagining inclusive pedagogy and decolonizing the curriculum within the academy. Let's check that out. It's an article by 3 people total. Now, decolonizing the curriculum within the academy. Do you
So, first of all, I'm going to kind of chime in here. Reimagining inclusive pedagogy. This is important. Okay. Once again, I'm not going to just glaze everything that Dr. Arday said here, but I'm just going to kind of explain the importance of it. Okay. Inclusive pedagogy. That's a phrase that, once again, wouldn't be meaningful to him. To me, it's meaningful. Okay. Because he's talking about the higher levels of education. He's not talking about like key stage 3, key stage 4, key stage 5. He's talking about, the from diploma, degree, PhD level. Okay, these are, I think most of this actual paper focuses on people who are at PhD level. Okay, so pedagogy means something completely different than it means to you and I. Because pedagogy to me as a high school teacher, means, differentiation, lesson plans, making sure that I've thought about making sure I've got some kind of assessment in place, assessment criteria, what kind of homeworks I put in place, how I engage the students, what kind of feedback and assessments I give them, etc., 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 etc. Yeah. So that's what pedagogy means to me. Okay. Pedagogy at PhD level is completely different. This is talking specifically about mostly, I'd imagine, the engagement between supervisor and student. Okay. That's going to be, that's a massive thing. And he's talking about being inclusive. And one of the things I've spoken about with two people of color who have PhDs is the lack of engagement they've got at supervision level. Many of them, unlike their white colleagues, have moved institutions sometimes more than once to get to an end of their PhD because their supervisors just weren't engaged. So inclusive pedagogy means something completely different to a black academic. To him, it's just two words that have literally nothing to do with anything. It's just trying to sound intelligent. But to actual people who go through, ethnic minorities who are going through this academic process, that actually is very meaningful to them. And he's just kind of glossed over it. And he talks about decolonizing the curriculum. Well, I've just explained the background or the history of academia in the UK and it being largely predicated on colonizing, okay? Largely predicated on this kind of like unspoken nationalist and racial superiority that has fed into almost every subject. This colonizing of curricula is a very real thing, but you won't understand or engage with it if you don't know our history, if you don't know our present, and if you are engaged with academia in Britain. You won't understand that.
I think that's a thing that is possible. Do you think you can decolonize, for example, Cambridge University or any university in the UK, or indeed all the universities in the UK?
No, he's not saying that. He said decolonizing. In other words, he's identifying a process that takes steps. You start here. Okay, let's start with inclusivity in terms of the pedagogy. Okay, let's start with a few policies take place. Let's start with some more diversity. Let's move towards a decolonized curricula, not doing it in one act. Okay, so that's what I read from this book.
No, you can't. So the very premise of this from the beginning should be raising your eyebrows as to what exactly this field of study is actually for. What the fuck is decolonizing the curriculum within the academy in the context of like Western academia? What does that mean? It doesn't mean much. Doesn't mean much, I'll tell you. Like what?
Doesn't mean, so do you see what I mean, guys? So it's about the language being used here, because something is meaningless to him as someone who doesn't engage, or sorry, as someone who optionally engages in race, as all white people do. They optionally engage in race. It's kind of like, oh, I feel like protesting race today, and then they might be in a protesty mood. Okay. Oh, I feel like acting like race doesn't exist today, and then they won't feel like race doesn't exist. Oh, I feel like being anti-black today. Yeah, this is something that they optionally engage in. Okay, so it's easy for him to say it's meaningless to me. Of course it's meaningless to you. It's not a part of your life. It's not a part of your existence. Okay, you optionally engage in race. Black people don't optionally engage in race. Race is enforced upon us as a population. It's enforced upon us as individuals. The only time it becomes an option is if we choose to ignore it, and often that means kind of like ignoring degrading behavior, or turning off the television when something racist comes on, or adjusting your behavior to make people around you feel comfortable, or being exceptional, where your colleagues only have to exist. These are the kinds of things that we do to when we choose to ignore race, the Brandon Tatum way. Oh, yo, we talk about race too much. Okay, yeah, cool, but it's never gonna stop existing. Yeah, that it's optional for you, but not for us. That's what the point I'm making. I hope is very clear here.
What would a decolonized Cambridge University, for example, look like? What the fuck would that look like? It's an institution that exists for colonialism, right? We're talking about colonialism, imperialism. We're talking about an entire apparatus that is set up to enforce and maintain the material advantage that the West has over the rest of the world. Okay, that's the point of these sorts of institutions. So you can't.
Okay, so he's almost contradicted himself there, because he's talked about the fact that these institutions have been set up to give the West advantage over the rest of the world, which is very true. Okay, that actually agrees with the point that I raised earlier. The point is, and this is the one of the probably bigger critiques that I have with Ban Empanada, is that he refuses to engage race as one of the not only contributors but one of the drivers of this advantage, so to speak, of the West. Okay, it's not just a geographic advantage. Oh, West versus East. It's a racial advantage. So it has a macrocosmic or a geographic. Has a geographic representation where there's the whole Orient and the global South, etc., being under the thumb of the West. But then it also has a microcosmic in population effect as well, where people who sit within certain demographics inside Western organizations also bear the brunt and feel the impact of this superiority. This paper is trying to challenge that. Okay, you can't do everything on a single paper. You can't friggin' take down the little hat, stop the war in Palestine, decolonize Africa. You can't do all of that in a single go. Okay, it takes people actually making steps, and one of the steps that is being made by this paper that you're trying to ridicule is to open up inclusivity. It's trying to open up inclusivity, trying to get more people who look a certain way fall into those kind of like outside groups, those out groups, those pariah demographics, trying to get them into places by getting the academic institutions to understand where they are racist. And he has to do all of that without offending them. And you, for the life of you, will never understand how friggin' difficult that is. You won't understand it. Let me give a quick shout out to Dregger, who says BE has a whiteness problem, unfortunately. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, he has a white privilege problem. Okay. He's one of the better ones, and I will stand on that, even with for all of his faults. He's one of the better ones, but he absolutely lives in a world of white privilege. And so for him, race is an optional. It's identity politics. It's something that Black people play with to their advantage, apparently. It's something that we all want to constantly talk about. He doesn't have the foggiest idea. He doesn't have the foggiest idea what academics like. I mean, Jason Arday's life should be testament to the fact that you can't just be Black and exist. You have to be writing papers like this. Because look what took him down in the end. It was racism, okay? We all agree it was racism that took him down. It was the foul treatment. It was the double standard. So everything that he's highlighted, everything he's fought against in his life ended up being his undoing anyway. And you're talking about, oh, maybe if he just sat on the edge and didn't talk about identity politics, it would have been better. How? How, Sway? How would it have been better if he had said nothing about it? I think this actually improves his legacy, the fact that his entire legacy was fighting against the very thing in the end that came to bring him down. Anyway, let me
can't decolonize them. What they mean by decolonization isn't actually decolonization. It's nothing to do with decolonization. They're just appropriating this term and turning it into like an academic jargon term for like the curriculum talking more about.
I'm sorry, but to jump in there, I know I'm nitpicking here, but people who ancestrally come from colonies can't appropriate the term decolonization. So this is once again, he lives in this optional world. Do you hear that? Oh, they're just appropriate. People like to throw back terms like appropriation onto Black people. It's like cultural appropriation. The only people who are culturally appropriated in a systemic way are Black people. And now he's talking about, oh, they're just appropriating the term Decolonization, like, are you freaking kidding me? He literally is he's ancestrally Ghanaian. Ghana was literally colonized by the British. Yeah, he literally is one of the only people that could use the term decolonization legitimately. And then you're going to turn around and be like, oh, they're appropriating the term. Once again, it's optional for you. You're white. Yeah, you get to pick and choose. Don't turn around, please, to black people and tell them that we can't use this kind of language. It's absolutely ridiculous.
About like non-white, non-European experiences, philosophy, history, and that sort of thing, and treating non-white people better. It's really about broadening the spectrum of who is included in Western colonialism and imperialism.
No, it's about improving the spectrum of who is included in Western academia. That's what the paper's about. Now, for you to kind of like equate him wanting more black people to be in the academic space to him wanting to help Britain with colonialism is, I mean, it's quite ridiculous, isn't it? That's an asinine argument. And I think this is at this point, this is a ridiculous argument that's being made.
Much more than it is about actually being decolonial. Nothing about it is decolonial. So the introduction is anti-racist education holds the potential to truly reflect the cultural hybridity of our diverse, multicultural society through the canons of knowledge that educators celebrate, prefer, and embody. The centrality of whiteness as an instrument of power and privilege ensures that particular types of knowledge continue to remain omitted from our curriculums. The monopoly and proliferation of dominant white European canons comprise much of our existing curriculum and consequently impacts adversely on Black, Asian, and minority ethnic learners' engagement and sense of belonging. Within higher education, campaigns such as the Decolonizing the Curriculum movement and Why is My Curriculum White have sought to challenge and dismantle the existing orthodoxies by advocating a curriculum that reflects the multiple histories of Black and Indigenous populations globally, particularly within the United Kingdom. If you read...
Now, before he even says anything, that was it hard read for me. That was perfectly easy. I thought most of you, yeah, that made perfect sense. It's exactly literally what I was just talking about. Okay, it kind of touches on the fact that, you know, there's this centrality of whiteness. There's been this massive skew towards teaching a certain way that has been exclusive of certain groups. Okay, it's been monopolized, and therefore it's massively affected our engagement as groups, yeah, as ethnic minority groups, if we want to use the language just here, although I hate the term BAME, and that's probably written at a time when BAME was here. Thank God we're scrapping that god-awful term. We don't need to be grouped with other groups, to be totally honest with you. Within higher education, campaigns such as Decolonizing the Curriculum, it's higher education. I was getting confused, sorry. Why is My Curriculum White? Have sought to challenge and dismantle existing orthodoxies by advocating a curriculum that reflects multiple histories of Black. Now, he won't understand this. We want, even me personally, I'm not like a massive fan of inclusive curriculums. That's not one of my answers. But I do understand that if we're going to have more representation at a higher education level, then we're going to have, as a step towards that, more inclusive curriculums. And we'll have to talk about history well, not even just history, we'll have to talk about culture in a more inclusive and diverse way. Yeah, I perfectly understand that. Even though I'm not a massive person who's like, I don't want a big, to me, it's not, I don't think it's that beneficial to have inclusive curriculums, because there's too much bad faith within teachers to teach things that they find challenging correctly, and so they'll bastardize it, which is why Black history is taught so terribly across the UK. It's taught awfully by anyone who's not Black, basically. So there are those issues that we have, but the bottom line is I read that paragraph and it made perfect sense to me, and I'm sure to most of you it made perfect sense. Let's hear what his summary of that paragraph is, because I think it was quite succinct. It was to the point. It challenged whiteness, but it did it without saying you're just a racist. Yeah, let's see what he says about this.
Read this, and you don't see exactly what I outlined at the beginning. I don't know what to tell you, right? You can't decolonize Cambridge University. You can't decolonize Western universities in general. Saying let's decolonize the academy in the UK is like saying let's decolonize the IDF, let's decolonize the US military, let's decolonize the US government. That's meaningless. You can't do that. Those institutions exist by and for colonialism. What this is actually about is broadening the spectrum of who's included. This field of study exists basically to create people who do like sensitivity training at corporations. It exists to get people in the imperial core who aren't white feeling.
No, it's to get more black people and people of ethnic minorities into higher education. I think that's what's been laid out there, and I think everyone would agree that's not only a good thing, but it's necessary. Yeah, we can't, particularly with people like Nathan Cofnas out there and Donald Trump, and insert other right wing commenters who are pushing the idea that black people don't have the intelligence to do certain things. It's absolutely necessary that we have more people of black and ethnic minorities occupying the very top parts of the educational strata. It's absolutely necessary. Absolutely necessary. And you're saying, oh, well, what do you want them to do? Do you want people who are born in the UK, black people who are born in the UK, to go and do their doctorate in Ghana and do their doctorate in Nigeria and do their doctorate in the Middle East or wherever? You want them to leave the country of their birth because these are all colonies and therefore they're never going to be for us? It's an absolutely ridiculous argument. Okay, we need to have a strong corpus of educated people to be able to establish to establish pockets. I don't want to say pockets. The one kind of to be able to create pressure and influence in certain areas. Okay, we want to be able to have that kind of pressure, but also then that will feed into political pressure. It will feed into better representation. It will feed into better education. It will feed into more scholarship, more books, more academic works that people can then reference. All of this, it all works together. And to write it off to say, oh, well, these are colonial institutions and all you want to do is be a part of the club that then is going to be bombing Gaza. It's incredibly simplistic. Do you understand? It doesn't make any sense. It's incredibly one-sided and simplistic. And it's like the thing you're arguing is that we should disengage with education. Is that what you're arguing here? That no black and ethnic minorities should try and get into higher education in the UK? It's an asinine argument. I don't understand it one bit.
And indeed, perhaps actually included in the Imperial Project. That's what this is about. Like, this sort of research exists to give off the impression that something is being done. And perhaps it even is being done. Perhaps they even are making strides to include non-white people in the curriculum to improve their feeling of belonging on campus and all that sort of thing. But that's not...
It's not the feeling of belonging on campus. Once again, he's euphemizing and trying to minimize what is being expressed here. People aren't doing this because they feel like belonging. As someone who has never experienced racism by the empanada, please do not opine about why black people want to see racism deconstructed or at least addressed when they're in situations of academia. You have never been in a situation where someone has tried to derail your progress because of your race or has denied you an opportunity because of your race. Until you go through that experience, you don't get to use terms like, oh, they want to feel belonging. That's called privilege. You get the privilege to start protests over feeling like you belong. Okay, that's not our experience. We don't argue alongside you. Do you understand that? We don't argue alongside you in this. We have completely divergent experiences, and you don't get to guess why people like Dr. Arday write papers like this.
Not decolonization. That's just giving them a stake in imperialism. It's opening up imperialism. The material relation of imperialism still exists. You know, if black Britons are included in it, the vast majority of black people are still excluded because they don't live in Britain. They live in countries that Britain benefits from keeping oppressed. Like the last line here, dismantle the existing orthodoxies by advocating a curriculum.
Yeah, but even that argument, yes, black people in Britain are still a minority. So even if every black person in Britain got a doctorate, there'd still be a minority of black people around the world. What does that have to do with the price of bread? I don't understand. It's still a benefit that they're able to progress because they have more influence. They have more influence in world policies. They have more influence, like I said, in politics. They have more influence in literature and scholarship. All of these things sew into this discussion. So that doesn't make any sense, once again.
That reflects the multiple histories of black and indigenous populations globally, but particularly in the United Kingdom. So if the curriculum at British universities talked more about the histories of non-white people, would that change anything? Would that be decolonization? No, it wouldn't. it's all like liberal representation framing, right? Like the dearth of black and ethnic minority gatekeepers to knowledge in the academy has been a contributing factor in sustaining systemic racism and stereotypes against ethnic minority groups. So like, let's install some black and ethnic minority gatekeepers to knowledge in the academy. Like, let's get some representation in there. It's liberal representation slop, basically.
Well, this is where he completely falls over. Excuse me, I've lost my camera, so I'm just gonna switch over camera now. It overheated. Let me turn that bad boy off. And so, guys, we're going to be wrapping up relatively soon on this, by the way. I'm just letting you all know in advance, unless someone gives me a strong reason to go, and I will wrap this up soon. Let's switch to this one. This is my camera that continually fails for no good reason these days, but it's not too bad. Not too bad, is it? Okay, so I think let me find that sentence that he just highlighted there. There you go. So the dearth of black and ethnic minority gatekeepers to knowledge in the academy has been a contributing factor in sustaining systemic racism and stereotypes against ethnic minority groups. So he was saying that, well, let's get some more black and ethnic minority gatekeepers, yeah, into the academy, and that's going to improve things. That's not the point that is being made here. Okay, the point being made here is in the second half of the sentence, which says it has been a contributing factor in sustaining systemic racism and stereotypes. Okay, so it's because of the fact that these gatekeeper positions are held by white people. And I've had these conversations with PhDs, like I said, who've experienced this. These gatekeeping positions that are held are actually stopping a large amount of black, and I'm not going to speak for other ethnic minorities here, I'm just going to say black, a large amount of black people from progressing into higher education, because they're told point blank by professors, yeah, I don't think you're suitable for this. Why don't you try something else? Continually. It's very, very pervasive. It's really, really difficult. And so we're talking about blocking that by having black people in professorships such as Jason Arday, who you will not know supervised black academics. So during his time as professor in Cambridge, he supervised black academics. He got them into and through a PhD program, maybe not all the way because he's only there for like 3 years, but he was a part of, or the latter part of, many people's PhD kind of like candidate thesis, research projects, etc. He was there because he understood that. And by the way, he would have had a much larger proportion of black PhDs than any of his white colleagues, because they understood they had a gateway, they had a gate into higher education that they weren't being offered before. Now, this isn't DEI. This isn't because they are unqualified. This is because of active racism that stops black people from being able to access that. Do you understand that? There's a big, big difference to what you're saying here and what the reality is. This isn't about people just wanting to be included and wanting to be a part of the colonizer boys club. Some people actually, we don't have to explain. You know, black people don't have to explain to you why they want to be educated. Okay, we don't even have to have a good reason. We might not even have an altruistic reason for wanting to be educated. Maybe some people just want a friggin' PhD because they want a PhD, because they want to be a researcher. How about that? Let's have a meritocratic approach to whether or not someone gets a PhD or doesn't get a PhD. You disqualifying this as fluff is the height of privilege, and that has to be acknowledged.
Now, the actual substance of this, beyond the rosy sounding like wankery that you get in the first couple of pages, when you get down to what this paper is actually about. By the way, I want to note that at no point does he actually define what he means by decolonizing the curriculum. 3 of them sort of imply that what it means is increasing like minority representation and learning more about like non-white histories and ways of thinking and ways of knowledge in these terms that they use in like the academy. And this is the crux of what this study actually is. All of Arday's papers that I've read are practically the exact same as this. Let's read it in their words. In challenging the normative orthodoxies, this paper attempts to advocate the benefits of a decolonized curriculum for all learners as a means of navigating an ethnically diverse society by drawing on a critical race theoretical framework to centralize the marginalized voices of 15 Black, Asian, and minority ethnic students and free academics of color regarding this phenomenon. Exploring the need for diversifying the canon also facilitates the need to examine and provide some conclusion on the role of gatekeepers tasked with delivering knowledge and whether this endeavor has included the pedagogical output of students and academics of color.
So this is, I just want to jump in here quickly because once again, from being from an inclusive position, I understand what's going on here. So first of all, the big question mark people are going to have is why there's only 18 people in this study. So this isn't like some massive, broad, blind study, you know what I mean, where they're, no, this is a small study, but you also have to understand these people are PhD candidates, okay? You don't have massive access, okay, to be able to research hundreds of thousands of PhD candidates simultaneously. So these are people who are operating within a very specific position, okay? The second thing is, we're talking about essentially, and this is what, when you're in academia, particularly in, you know, Dr. Arday's position or any other PhD position, yeah, you have to be very careful. You can't go out and say, oh, well, you know, we've got 18 people and we're gonna investigate how racist their supervisors are. Because that's essentially what this is saying. We want to see if the supervisors are racist and they make it easier or more difficult for them. You have to dress that up in a way where the study is being done, the challenge is being made, but it's not making the people feel like they're being, you know, being targeted. You're not making supervisors and people who could essentially fire you feel like they're being targeted. So you dress it up in a way. You say, oh yeah, we know, we looked at this, blah, blah, blah. We're exploring the need for diversifying the canon, facilitates the examine and provides some conclusions on the role of gatekeepers tasked with delivering knowledge and whether, so he's talking about the fact that, you know, we want these people to not be racist. We've talked to these 18 people. They've all said they've dealt with racism from their supervisors. How do you say that in a way when you're in black academia that doesn't get you A, fired and B, blackballed from all academic institutions? You have to be very careful in the way you phrase it. And that's, once again, because race is an optional extra for Bad Empanada, he's not going to empathize with this. You know, that's the difference.
What does that actually mean? Well, if you get through the overly verbose language surrounding this, what he's saying there, what they're saying there is, we asked 18 Black, Asian, and minority ethnic students / academics, basically their opinions on racism. We asked 18 people their opinions on racism. Methodology.
No, not just their opinions on racism. They're quite specific. They were talking about the role of gatekeepers, okay? And the impact of those gatekeepers. So they're talking specifically about the level of supervision that they were receiving during their research, and if they felt race had impacted how they were being supervised. This is what Bad Empanada is missing. He doesn't, I'm not going to say he doesn't understand, because there's great potential that he does understand, but I'm going to say he, once again, because this topic is so fluffy to him, is so optional, because he doesn't experience any of the things that he's opining about right now. This is why he has this perception. It's a false perception based on the fact that he doesn't engage with the concept or even existence of racism. Someone mentioned that he lives in Argentina. You know, that's one of the most horrendous recent genocides of Black people in history. So to be that racially either insensitive or to be, you know, to literally be voluntarily unaware of how openly racist that nation is. Like, it's one of the most openly vile and racist nations, and to act like, oh, racist, the discussion of race is all kind of like, do you know what I mean? The discussion of race is identity politics. It's not. Like, you literally live in Argentina. You know how pervasive race is. You know what issue it is. You know that a Black Argentinian and a white Argentinian are not going to have, they're going to have completely different daily experience. Not even talking about, let's take higher education off the table. I'm talking about just walking down the street. A Black Argentinian and a white Argentinian I mean, there aren't really any Black Argentinians left, because the genocide was so was so successful. Yeah, so the fact that you live in a nation like that and you have these kinds of views, I can see why people are kind of like leaning towards saying that you're probably anti-Black racist, because how are you ignorant of racism and live in Argentina? That's like, how is that even possible? How's that even possible? Guys, 5 more minutes and we'll wrap this up, okay?
For the purpose of this study, 15 BAME students and 3 academics of color were recruited from 7 UK-based universities. 15 60-minute semi-structured interviews and one focus group interview were completed in attempting to glean perspectives on aspects of decolonizing the curriculum and an exploration of the potential for a more inclusive pedagogy within higher education that is reflective of diverse British society. The recruitment of participants was facilitated through access to extensive BAME academic networks. Initially, participants were enlisted for a purposeful sampling process, which involved recommendation from several BMAE colleagues. What that means is the authors on this paper asked around, like, hey, do you know any Black people or non-white people who are students or academics at universities who we can ask about their experiences with racism on campus? And they asked them about their experiences with racism on campus. And then they published a paper where they selectively cited parts of what these people supposedly said and then mused on it. So basically, they asked 18 people for their own subjective experiences regarding like how racism and like white supremacy and like Eurocentrism affects them in the academy. And then they published a paper where they muse on their own subjective opinions regarding what they can glean from the subjective responses of those people. Now, this is the sort of thing that...
Now, to be very clear, even though he's massively oversimplifying what was taking place, that's a perfectly legitimate study. Okay, it's a perfectly legitimate study. It's it's about racism. You know what? There's nothing you can't. There's nothing to measure here. Do you understand what I mean? You got like we measured the whip strokes on the back of black people who had received who'd been taken into slavery. It's like there's no. It is going to be broadly subjective. It is, you know, when someone's received racism in a Western, you know, country that no longer practices overt racist laws, a lot of what you're going to discuss and a lot of what's going to be recorded is going to be individual. Okay, that's still a legitimate study. Okay, it might not be, like I said, I don't think it's even marketing itself to be this kind of like broad overarching, you know, study that's being, you know, utilized for, you know, massive amounts of future research, but it's still a valuable piece that needs to be done. And once again, like I said, if you're outside of that realm of experience, it's just going to go over your head. But anyway, look, guys, I think I'm going to wrap it up there because you get the idea. If you want to carry on watching this video, feel free to. He does carry on going through. And like I said, I disagree with him quite strongly. I particularly disagree with him because I feel like he could have gone through one of Nathan Cofnas's pieces like this with a fine-tooth comb, and that would have been really entertaining. It started off in the first 4 minutes great. I would have loved to have seen him take down Nathan Cofnas. Instead, he's chosen to focus all of his energy on Dr. Jason Arday, which is a little bit disappointing, if I'm going to be totally honest with you. But, you know, there you go. That's what he chose to do. Like I said, I don't think he understands or even tries to understand racism or the experience or the, you know, the lived experience, the lived daily experience of Black people, you know, or people who have actually had to battle with this, and it not being an optional kind of like, oh, identity politics, circle jerk. No, it's a lived experience for all Black people, particularly those of us who live as minorities in the West. And these are things that need to be improved. We don't want to be held back or gatekept from educational opportunities. Not everything has to reflect. Not everything we do here has to reflect in Palestine. And I think that's one of the things that I think with these people who kind of like, he's operating in identity politics. Okay, he's suddenly coming, I'm pro-Palestine, oh yeah, anti-left, oh yes, it's very exciting for him. Okay, this is an optional outlay of energy for him to engage in Palestine, you know, pro-Palestinian politics for a Black person. You know, this isn't something that we jump in and out of as we choose to. It's a lived experience that we deal with on a daily basis. You don't understand that. And we don't, you know, it's not identity politics when we talk race. It's literally a matter of life and death for us. But anyway, that's it, guys. I just wanted to kind of like share that with you. I hope you enjoyed the live stream. If you did, hit up the likes. Okay, let's get the likes at least matching the number of people who are in the stream or well and above that. That would be fantastic. If you like the channel and you appreciate what I do, feel free to join me on the Members Academy or on Patreon or on a YouTube membership. Any of those and all of those would be massively appreciated. But other than that, guys, I will see you soon. Have a fantastic weekend, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace. Oh, let me just quickly give a shout out before I actually disappear as well to Drega, Tuko Pamoja, and Ekene Okere for their very generous donations. They are very, very, very appreciated. For the second time now, Bruce.